would you look at the camera and tell them?
Which camera?
Any camera. And tell them.
Directing the show?
Yeah, that's right. Well, you certainly need some direction, Mr. Zappa.
Well, spank me here? Come on, what are you...
Well, you into that too, huh? No, I'm not into spanking.
I love it when you froth like that.
Sure. Now, would you tell our viewers that what the Founding Fathers...
I thought he was going to be the one frothing today. I'm glad that you're doing it.
Wrong again, Frank. Wrong again. Now,
got a napkin
would you tell us? Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, would you look in the camera and tell them with a straight face that you think the Founding Fathers had in mind the kind of garbage you sing and write when they drafted the Fifth Amendment? Do you really believe that, Mr. Zappa?
I don't think it applies. The Founding Fathers, one thing, kept slaves, and take a look at what Benjamin Franklin used to do over at the Hellfire Club.
But you have repeatedly...
Not exactly a bunch of swell guys. I think they had some good things in mind, but we have a document, the letter of the law. Yeah. Let's use the letter of the law and interpret it based on the 20th century.
It is relevant because you have repeatedly, in opposing even ratings for rock music, you have repeatedly cited the Constitution and the First Amendment. Do you think the Founding Fathers really had the First Amendment, that they gave us the First Amendment to defend songs that glorify Satanism and incest and suicide? You believe
Absolutely.
That? You really believe that?
Yeah, I believe it.
You're an idiot then. You're an idiot.
Tell you what, kiss my... How do you like that?
Take your teeth out. Take your teeth out.
That's fine. Let's call it.
Come on, let's get into this serious. Come on, let's cover that.
Just when you thought it was safe to put on your headphones, you entered the darkest, wildest, sexiest depths of technology. And here to keep you on the bleeding edge of science, tech, and ethics is the Rated R radio star, the man of tomorrow, the golden stallion of the tech world, Brian Sovryn. He has a huge brain. And now, here's Brian.
The show that makes them all clutch the pearls, baby. It is Sovryn Tech, and I am the Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R radio star, the man that some call, well, hell, they call me a lot of things, but have I ever, I'm pretty sure someone's called me Space Mountain once or twice. I love that. And those that know where the comes from, you'll know why that's important, baby. But the man that some call the most interesting anarchist in the world today. And do we got a lot of tech to get into this week. I'm going to start this right off just by saying that unfortunately, it's not fortunately, unfortunately, just because there are so many stories from the past couple weeks, the reaction from the episodes that I've gotten the past couple weeks. A lot of positive, admittedly, a lot of fucking negative that people did not appreciate over the past couple weeks. Of course, I had the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy on the past 2 weeks. And last week, of course, we had the absolutely amazing Paige Peterson on. And that was just an awesome, awesome time. But a lot of people, may not be entirely pleased with them. But whatever, baby, because I'll tell you that myself, I would rather get treated like Giordano Bruno than crawl around on my belly like Galileo did with the church, baby. I'd rather go all the way. Never, ever water it down. Always be the thorn in the side. That's me. That's Sovryn Tech. So, but this week, like I said, because I have so many stories to cover, so many huge tech stories. I mean, I'm not kidding. We have like 6 tech stories, and I've got all the links in the show notes for episode 226. There's probably more links in episode 220 of this episode for episode 226 than have ever been in any other Sovryn Tech episode, because I want you to see, if you want to look further into it and not just take my word for it. I mean, just all the shit that's going on. I mean, like there's 5-6 stories that have happened over the past couple weeks that really need coverage. From the WannaCry, and I was saying you WannaCry, I'm saying, the ransomware WannaCry, that probably a lot of people have heard about. There's so much to say about that. There's the Intel AMT engine that we got to talk about. There's the HP, what was it, the firmware for the connection, was it for the audio chip? We'll be getting into that later, but where it was keylogging, like everything you did, and anybody that knew, where to look could just extract whatever you're typing in plain text. I mean, just crazy. We've got I mean, those are just some of the stories that I got to get into. Then there's the announcement of Windows 10S, Google I/O just happened the past couple days. I mean, like, it's loaded. So because of that, and also because I've had some of those past couple weeks, we've been doing some of the longest episodes of Sovryn Tech ever, where they're 2 hours, 30 minutes, 2 hours, 40 minutes, something like that. Some of my affiliates are like, Brian, you got to get it back down to 2 hours, man. We can't just let this stuff roll off. And people are calling in asking, hey, where's the rest of the show? When they're listening, because when there's the answer from, of course, the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy, the producer and just one of the most amazing human beings on the planet Earth today. She said it. You got to go to solutions.zog.ninja if you want to get it all. But sometimes I don't always get to say that, and sometimes people miss it. So anyway, so I want to make sure that we keep this down to 2 hours, but we have so many stories to cover, and there's such a broad range, it'd be tough to even put them into categories, that I am saving the reveal of the new segment intros, which everybody loves, the forwarding story of Agent Sovryn and the bevy of beautiful and brilliant ladies that always join him. I'm going to save that for episode 227. So, but as you've heard in previous episodes, in fact, Stephanie herself said, she heard the preview of them and they are hot as hell. So get ready for that. But this is an episode, just so much to cover. And also, admittedly, let's maybe this way it'll just be a touch more palatable to people, even though, like I just said, I don't care. I'll have all the moans, all the hedonism, all the sex, whatever dripping from this show like a waterfall, okay, every single week. But here we go. So let's get into it. Let's start talking about this stuff. And I did, just to give you a heads up of what's coming, we are going to do, even though I'm not going to do like the segment intros and everything, I'm going to try and touch on all the new segments that I had planned anyway. That includes, we're bringing back Game Talk. We're bringing back Tool of the Week, and Tool of the Week isn't an insult, by the way. And we also have a new segment that'll be coming up, which is Album of the Week, but I'll talk about that when we get to it, if we get to it. Because again, I want to make sure I have maximum amount of time to talk about the big stories here. And I did see, just last night, of course, I'm recording this on May 20th, 2017. I did last night, myself and the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy, we went and saw Alien Covenant, and you better believe I'm going to be doing a review of it. So spoiler alerts right out of the gate when I get to that, because you're going to want to see it first. And I'll tell you this right now, I thought it was awesome. So you can go ahead and see it. I'll give a deeper review later on. But if you got the money and you got the time, baby, you know what to do. you go for it and check this movie out. So anyway, all right, that's it. Let's get into the Foreplay. Of course, Foreplay is not going anywhere. This is where we cover kind of the briefer stories that happened throughout the week. And really, this is going to be for like the past 3 weeks, some of this stuff. Not all of it though. But anyway, so open it up with something a little fun. So while I was actually on a trip, and if you follow me on social media, you've probably seen some of the pictures of my trip. I was in Charlottesville, not at the same time that Richard Spencer was there. It was boy if we were. Anyway, I was in Charlottesville, and there was like this interesting update that sent to the app Waze, which of course is the map app, which is now it's amazing to me that Waze is actually still a separate app because it is owned by Google. They bought them out. So why it's not fully integrated into Google Maps yet, I don't know. Maybe it's kind of a Litecoin, Bitcoin situation where Litecoin can test stuff out. And how about some interesting stories going on with Litecoin and Bitcoin, huh? I mean, yours.network transferring over to Litecoin. That's wild. And, there's good reasons why. And then Bitcoin, going through the roof over 2,000. Holy shit. SegWit or, Bitcoin Unlimited or not. Price going through the roof. Unbelievable. And I'm not going to comment on bubbles and things like that here. That's not the point. But anyway, maybe Waze is a place where Google feels like that they can test bed kind of new features. Well, one of the new features that they released while we were traveling was a new voice for Waze. And the voice was Mr. T. How? And me, like, I didn't even have Waze installed, but when I caught the news that it had Mr. T on, I was like, oh, I got to hear this. And so, on my not so important smartphone, I put Waze on it and I put on Mr. T, and it was a riot. I mean, admittedly, he's not like saying all the street names. Like he'll say, turn left, fool, or turn right, fool. He'll say stuff like that. Right. So it's very basic. But it was still kind of funny. You do get tired of it after a little while. So it's not like I've held on to Waze, on my phone, but I thought that was interesting. And I guess they have a bunch of other voices coming out too. This was one of the things that kept me from getting rid of my Garmin for a long time, was I had the Darth Vader voice pack on it, and I loved that. That was so well done. And really there isn't anything on the smartphone, I don't think, that replicates that at the moment. But now also ways, I think just in the past week, they also made it to where you can put in your own voice, or, whatever voice you're mimicking even, to, instead of having to use Mr. T or, whatever else. So I think that's, that's cool for what it is. I mean, understand it's Google, but yeah, rock on. So, I mean, come on, me as and longtime listeners of Sovereign Tech know I'm a huge A-Team fan. I mean, how can you not, love hearing Mr. T talking to you, let alone directing you, while you're driving around in, what was it, the GMC G15 van? Was that what the A-Team van was? I love that thing. Anyway, so check that out if you haven't. It's pretty funny. But yeah, so all right, another little bit of fun bit of business here. So, and I actually did a Patreon. This is going to be a couple tidbits of I guess shop talk perhaps, because I did a Patreon episode about this. But just the other day there was the first look trailer by CBS for their new Star Trek show, for Star Trek Discovery, which is something that we've talked about here and there on Sovereign Tech, and I've questioned whether or not this thing will ever even get released, and that's still in the back of my mind. But I did a whole Patreon episode. It was about 40 minutes long, where I did a full breakdown of everything in that trailer, what I thought about it. I'm not going to share it here, but if you want to become a patron, you get access to that. It's the latest show that I did. I'm going to end up having to do a show covering Google I/O 2017. I'm going to talk about it briefly here, but there was so much, released, revealed, talked about, planned at Google I/O 2017 that it would take up an entire Sovereign Tech. So I'm going to have to do a separate Patreon show. Now, if you want to become a Patreon, Patreon patron of Sovereign Tech, again, it's only $1 a month. That's the bare minimum. A lot of people do a lot more, and I'm honored by that. But that's all I'm asking is $1 a month. You get access to hundreds of hours of exclusive it's always new content. I'm not just grabbing stuff from, I don't know, the ether and and just putting it into the feed. This is stuff that I newly record. We do the Q&As that people love. I mean, it's awesome to be able to interact with everybody through Patreon is the platform. I get to interact in a million ways, not just via podcasts. And keep in mind, you get your own personalized podcast feed when you sign up. They'll email it to you, and then you can just download the episodes as they come out. You don't have to go to the Patreon page anymore after you set it up, and away you go. So, and a lot of people have been, every week I get more patrons, and I'm so honored by that, and it's really cool. And we're just, having a great time on there. So, something else that's upcoming that's going to be a great time that I just want to share with you quickly is I do have a kind of a sub-series, a sub-podcast series, not that has to do with submarines, even though I've been on one of those, but a sub-series of podcasts that I'm debating on the name, either calling it Use or User. And that's an acronym for Unexpected System Error. And this is going to be a sub-series. This is going to be a show that I'm going to do, regularly, where I talk about a lot of the stuff that really has nothing to do with science and tech. There's going to be a lot of history, a lot of philosophy, a lot of, all kinds of wild things, just life. It's going to be a show about life. And, I'm excited for it. And a lot of the patrons, when I made the announcement a couple of weeks ago, and they were all very excited for it. So that's another reason to jump on board with Patreon is you're going to get access to an exclusive podcast series, that's going to be running for the long haul. It's not like it's just going to be 2-3 episodes. This is going to be a long-term thing. And I'm already having a lot of fun, getting it ready, and that'll be coming out very soon. So get ready for that. Again, Use or User. Maybe I'm, because it's still error ends with an R. So, even though it's USE, unexpected system error, the R would still fit. So maybe I'll just call it User. But anyway, there you go. That's, I already announced that to the patrons a while ago. When you're a patron, you get to find out about things like months in advance, usually. So, all right. So there, we got that. We got all the Patreon stuff out of the way. Lots of great, I even talked about, I was talking about how I was, traveling. I went to Monticello, of course, Thomas Jefferson's, home. I was going to say ancestral home, but that's not exactly accurate. Well, it's kind of accurate. But I did a whole episode breaking down, my visit to Monticello, what I saw there, kind of my wilder historical theories around what I think was there, because there was some odd shit that I don't think a lot of people ever talk about or pick up on. And so I broke all that down too for about an hour. So again, all of that you get when you become a Sovereign Tech patron. All right, woo, let's get into some more tech news. We already started off with a little bit with Mr. T. But why don't we talk? I mentioned it with Google I/O. Like I said, I am going to end up doing a fuller breakdown, as it were, in the next couple days, really, and release that on Patreon. But just to kind of touch on the big stuff, because there was some big stuff. A lot of it had to do with Android O, which we've talked about here and there, some of the new features with that. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that because honestly, I don't think most people are even using Android N, Android Nougat or 7.1.1, which is the latest version right now, I think. So I don't know if telling you about Android O is even necessarily helpful. So I'll talk about that in the Google I/O special that I'll do. But I mean, like me, I'm stuck on Marshmallow right now. It have been for a while. So I don't know, but admittedly, one of the features, I'll mention this quickly, one of the big features, and I agree with it. I think it's it's a good trick to pull off with Google I/O or with Android O, is that they are going to make it so that more of the security, Android's going to be sectionalized a bit to where Google can push out major, system updates, not to where you get all the features of, say, when it becomes what is going to be Android P next. That's going to make for some funny statues with a little Android peeing. P. So when Android P, comes out with Android O, there's going to be segments of Android O that are kind of, this is how I understand it, that will be, portions of the OS that will be evergreen. They'll always be accessible and updatable, and they'll be backwards compatible with some of the security updates, say, that Android P or even Android Q would get, right? That way, this fragmentation issue that Android has, and it really does, and it's a security issue because it allows for exploits and everything. They kind of solve that. It's the right move. It's the right thing to do, to have these parts that are kind of backwards compatible with each other, no matter how far down the line Android goes. And these are kind of more the core systems that'll be readily updatable by Google. That way, you're not waiting for for your telco, for the mobile carrier to do the updates, because that's part of what takes these things so long. And also you're not waiting on the manufacturer as well, because manufacturers can just stop supporting devices, and they do that very often. So that's a nice move. But anyway, I'll save that for another episode. The other couple things that were interesting is that Google Assistant, boy, they pushed a lot with Google Assistant. And the most interesting thing to talk about there is that Google Assistant will now be coming out for iOS. And I have, two words to say to that, the fact that Google Assistant won't be an Android exclusive anymore. And that is goodbye, Siri. I mean, really. Even the diehard Apple users complain, or at least the ones I know, complain the fuck to no end about Siri. And so if you're getting Google Assistant, I'm not saying using Google, I recommend using Google Assistant. I don't. Okay. I don't like a lot of these virtual assistants. But as far as if you want to use the best one, well, Assistant's certainly better than Siri by a long shot. So, well, there you go. We'll see how that shapes up. I'm amazed Apple really allowed for it. Well, maybe if they didn't, people would be leaving their hardware platform and not just their software platform. So that's probably what went down. The other interesting thing was Google Lens, and then there's the big one. I'll get to that. But Google Lens So Google Lens is effectively Google Goggles. And what this is an app that, you install it on your smartphone, and whatever you look at. So with Google Goggles years ago, which hasn't been updated in forever, what you could do with that is you could point it at a sign or at a book and say in another language that you don't natively speak, and it would translate it for you. Which was really cool. Or, it would give you information about where you are or something like that if you just pointed at it. And Google Lens is that on steroids. To where you could point it at a flower and supposedly it will tell you what the flower is. It will look at network settings, and it will recognize that it's a network that you're trying to connect to, and it will do stuff about it. Now, obviously on a privacy standpoint, that kind of technology is terrifying as fuck. It is what I think is more interesting about it is how did this come to be? Like, what did Google figure out some master algorithm to make this sort of thing happen? Not at all. You made this happen. Now, and I don't necessarily mean you, because I think a lot of my listeners, maybe, they're a bit of a cut above, and they don't use things like Google Photos, and they don't give Google all of their photos and whatever. But this is why there is a free service. And in fact, yeah, there was a ton of news about Google Photos. I don't care, because I don't give my photos to Google, or at least I don't willingly. But Google Photos, the reason that they offered unlimited storage of photos was so that they could run all of your photos through machine learning, and then they could create a product like Google Lens. Now, you can say that, oh, well, isn't that wonderful? What a great trade-off. I get this great product like Google Lens, and all I have to do is give them every little ounce of privacy that I have left. Okay, if you think that that's a great trade-off, if you don't think that this is going to end up getting used against you in the court of law, if you don't think that this is going to end up getting used against you, by law enforcement or governments or whatever, I mean, well, fine. Then I guess you don't think that way. Maybe you're one of those people who thinks, well, I don't do anything wrong. Okay, yeah, well, it's a matter of time before, some new law comes around that, something you thought was totally innocent is no longer innocent, right? So, yeah, I mean, I see that feature and it's like, ooh, ah, but then I'm like, nah, no. It actually doesn't ooh, ah me at all. I just instantly, say to my, like, an impressive thing would have been if it was a tricorder, right? And it actually scanned the flower for its composition, and then it could tell you what kind of flower it was, because, okay, like that's an interesting technology. This is really just, you created this, the Google Photo user created this by offering up all their shit. And I guess some people think that's okay. Well, whatever. So Google Lens is a thing that's out there. This is something else too. Like what is it called? Face app or something? Not Facebook, but like Face app, where it's this app that can age you or make you look like a woman. It gives you like this breakdown and all that stuff. I mean, you understand, like that's all being designed to bolster, or that's all being put out there. The app's for free, and you think it's cute and fun, but it's all out there to just bolster the surveillance state, the surveillance society. Not just the state, because obviously Google's doing its share of surveilling, Google Lens. I mean, that's really what it is. It's to empower the, run your picture through machine learning. And that way they know what it's an attempt to like know more about you and be able to do facial recognition better, even when you're trying to hide what your face may look like, even if you put makeup on or you try to look like a gal or something like that, maybe to hide or whatever. Well, now don't worry, they'll have you figured out. So yeah, I mean, that's the problem with all this stuff. Lens, that Face app, a lot of these, and I see it being really popular. And I'm like, don't you guys understand that anytime these companies want to collect your photos, like there's a reason it's actually getting fed into a system that is going to help the NSA, CIA, FBI, but whatever, people don't, I guess they just don't care. So you don't care. So why am I talking about it? Let's move on to the last bit. This is the part that actually excites the fuck out of me. This is the part of Google I/O that I was like, okay, yes, this is what I was waiting for. Now it was leaked a bit ahead of time, and that was that there is going to be and actually I talked about this last year. There's going to be a standalone Google Daydream VR device. Like it's just going to be a standalone headset. You don't have to bring in the phone or anything. This is so key. This is so important. And of course they're going to release a VR version of Chrome called Chrome VR. Granted, Mozilla did this years ago with Firefox. We talked about it on Sovryn Tech. That was in like the double digit episodes. I mean, it was a long time ago. In fact, Paige Peterson, who was a guest on last week, she went to like their event, if I remember correctly, where they did the VR, and she was like, wow, yeah, web, virtual reality on the internet. I get this, even though at first I think the way, and if I'm misrepresenting her, of course she can correct me anytime she wants. But, she had said that like she wasn't really sold on the idea until she saw it, and then she's like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. So, and she was gracious enough. She actually gave me my first virtual reality headset. It was from a Dodo case. And that was awesome. But anyway, but this is going to be, obviously a very, that was like Google Cardboard. This is going to be a very serious device. Daydream so far doesn't appear to be taking off. Of course, they were already at Google I/O 2017. They were listing off Daydream 2.0. And I will break down more into the features of that, probably in the Google I/O special I'll do on Patreon. But suffice to say, this device is literally called standalone. Like that's the name, capital S standalone. All right. Daydream or standalone VR, whatever, but it's called standalone. And this is so important because while at the same time, I can see the advantage of having a phone that can access a lot of this stuff. You're paying for, in my opinion, with virtual reality, when you have a smartphone, you have to pay for a lot of features that really a VR headset just doesn't need, that you're getting with the smartphone. And also you have, there's some real technical issues that have yet to be solved. I mean, in the future, I think, a device, we might talk about this later in the episode, like, your mobile phone or whatever it happens to be, won't have the issues of battery and overheating and things like this, to where, it really can do everything for you, and get you through the day at the same time. We're just not at that stage. So standalone headsets I see as a totally viable thing, an important thing for virtual reality to have, and especially to not connect to a computer. I'm all for connecting to a computer. There's going to be advantages to that. That's going to be a thing for a long time. Don't misunderstand me. Okay. Like, I've talked about how, Microsoft has, their, what do they call it? Yeah, Windows MR. Now, I was thinking of originally they were calling it hologram, or like Windows holographic, right? That's what it was, Windows holographic. Now it's just Windows MR mixed reality. All of that stuff is fine and dandy, and I want it all to come to fruition. But this is one aspect that needs to be a thing, and I think that's great to have, especially because then it doesn't have to be a device that you're going to be updating every couple of years or whatever. It's something that you could hold on to, like a console, where a console could last you 6-8 years, even though that, release cycle of consoles is changing drastically, right? To now it's 2 or 3.5, 4 years. But it's something that can last you longer than a phone, and you can interact and have a lot more comfortability within VR when it's a standalone device. So I'm totally on board with this. I definitely want to get my hands on one whenever they come out. And I don't think they're supposed to come out till either end of this year or 2018. Obviously, they're looking to compete with Windows MR, but really cool that, yes, there is going to be a standalone Daydream device. Last year, it was theorized that they were going to release that, but they didn't when they announced Daydream. But now they finally did. Cool. There's no, you have no idea what the thing's going to look like. But it probably look like the Daydream headset that they have out now. I can't see why it wouldn't be, but I think this is going to be really cool. So looking forward to that. Moving on. Woo. So let's talk about away from Google I/O. That's enough Google I/O. I'll save the rest for another episode. Telegram 4.0. Holy shit. This is a platform. They just released version 4.0 this week. This is a platform that I've talked about for years on Sovryn Tech. I'm not going to talk about it as using it as an encrypted platform. It's quote unquote encrypted. A lot of people don't trust the encryption. They definitely did some ugly things. Telegram themselves did ugly things to how some of your data was being stored on your device. So some of it was in plain text. Of course, if your entire device is encrypted, like if you're doing kind of a whole disk encryption on a smartphone, that might not exactly be an issue, but then most people don't do that because it cuts down on performance on an Android phone. But Telegram, like, is an alternative platform that's actually run by an anarchist, and it is. Pavel Durov is a full-on anarchist, triple black wearing, the whole thing. Okay. That's run by that. That's not Facebook. That's not, some of these uglier social media companies. I mean, who wouldn't want to use that platform? Again, encrypted. Yeah, I get it. Don't trust the encryption. That's fine. But then you're probably still using Facebook and Twitter. Are you 100% trusting the encryption on there or something? Treat it like an open platform. I mean, I know Twitter does some encryption right, perfect forward secrecy and direct messages and all this stuff. Like I really understand that, but just keep it in perspective. And this is a really useful thing. But now with Telegram 4.0, I mean, they have quote unquote encrypted video calling, video messaging. There's tons of shit there. I really have a hard time thinking of the feature that Telegram doesn't have that any other messaging app has. It's phenomenal. So, just something to keep your eye out. If you haven't looked at Telegram in a while, maybe take another look at it. Certainly at least to get away from, start using it as a platform, as like a group. I mean, I see a lot of people using it as a group messaging platform. I think that's great because that gets you out of, like, say, Facebook groups and some other things. And that's really important. I ran like a dark Android channel on there for a good long while, but it eventually just fell out of favor because people just, I don't know, went back to Facebook or something. But anyway, Telegram 4.0, it's out there. Again, yeah, I'm not saying trust the encryption, but as an alternative platform to what's out there, yeah, it's open source, run by an anarchist. What more do you want? So anyway, now here's something that I talked about. This is probably 2 weeks ago on a Patreon Q&A show, but I want to bring it up here because I think it's a really important point. And that is the new Amazon Echo. Holy hell. I think I might have briefly mentioned it a couple weeks ago that there was a leak of an Echo with a touchscreen. In fact, I know I did. Well, it ended up the following week that Amazon just fully released it, maybe because of the fact that, that it was already leaked and like they just needed to get out in front of it and start promoting it before people came up with, personal horror stories in their own mind, which of course I was doing already. Anytime I hear about an Amazon Echo device of any, shape or size. And it's called the Echo Show. And it does, it's just this little like block, triangular device. I mean, it's a tablet on a stand effectively. That has all of the features that you generally expect from an Echo, and it has to be plugged in at all time. It's not like the Echo Dot where it has some portability features or anything of that nature. It's it's an Echo with a touchscreen, just like it says. And I personally, what I said on the Patreon episode, and I'll share it here since it's been a couple of weeks anyway. So what I think is going on, because we also talked about in the last Internet of Targets segment that we did, which, by the way, that segment's no longer part of the show. I hope I got the point across that you don't want the Internet of Things whatsoever because it infringes upon security. It's a security exploit waiting to happen, and it's a massive privacy issue. We talked about the Echo Look, which was the one with a camera on it, right? And that could kind of move and whatever. I think what Amazon's plan here, because a lot of people are asking, why the hell are they coming out with the Echo Show? Why are they coming out with an Echo with a touchscreen? Doesn't that defeat the point? Because isn't like the whole like excitement around the Amazon Echo is that it's a hands-free UI, right? Like, I mean, you don't, there's no user interface whatsoever, and then you're going to put a user interface on it. So I've heard a lot of people talk about that with confusion, but what I had said on Patreon was that, no, what I think is going on is that, because these are all plug-in devices except for like the Amazon or the Echo Dot. I think Amazon wants an Echo in every single room of your house. Okay. They want to make sure they've got you covered. So the Echo Look goes in the bedroom, like I was talking about, or where you get dressed anyway, maybe in a closet or something. The stock Amazon Echo sits in the living room, wherever you need a device that can just be kind of ubiquitous and doesn't steal the show, say away from the TV or something, or maybe you put that in the bathroom. I don't know, because you have to order toilet paper or some shit. And then you have the Echo Show, the one with the touchscreen on it. You have that in the kitchen. That way you can see things like you could see recipes and all this other stuff. You can get visual information for what you're asking for that maybe needs to sit somewhere for the long term. So I think that's really what the tactic is here. And then, of course, you have the Fire TV sticks, which those could take over the living room or wherever a room that's deemed necessary. Maybe put those in the kids' room or something, right? Because we got to spy on them, get them used to being listened to and watched at all times. And I hope I'm being facetious, but yeah, I think that's really the plan here, because it's not that impressive of a device. It really is exactly what it says. It's just an Echo with a fucking touchscreen on it, and then of course you have the Echo Dot, and the Echo Dot can go with you to work and wherever else you happen to be. And that way you're just constantly surrounded by these, premium experiences and premium devices, that may not be as wonky as just relying on everything on your smartphone. And they're, it's just ubiquitous. It's like it's in every room of your house, every room of your life. I think that's the real plan. So, and I mean, Amazon's already, this is did I mention this before? But this is an interesting statistic that apparently every dollar of every half of every dollar spent on the internet is spent on Amazon. So like literally half the money spent on the internet is spent on Amazon as far as, regular currencies go. Obviously with Bitcoin and, Zcash and some other things, it's a different story, but yeah, half of every, I guess you could say then half of every dollar, is effectively spent on Amazon. I mean, that's remarkable, and creepy to consider. So definitely on their path, what I've talked about for many years, that is the Amazon World Domination Tour, to becoming a monopsony, because if that's where you're spending most of your money, sure, they're not producing all the products, but they are shipping all of the products. They are the gateway to all of the products. And so that makes them a monopsony instead of a monopoly. You know, they have the control of distribution instead of the control of production. And that's I've been saying it for years on Sovryn Tech, that's been their plan. And I mean, like 4 years, like forever. So anyway, let's see, what other great stories do we have here? Well, while we're talking about the Echo, what the hell? Let's talk about a little something that Microsoft has planned. We're going to get into Microsoft more in just a second. But Harman Kardon finally, you know, Microsoft had an event. They're going to have another event in China, I think next week on the 23rd of May, 2017. But last week they had another event where they were concentrating big on education and all this stuff. Not uninterestingly, of course, it's the same time, or it was a couple weeks ago, that they announced the Surface Laptop and Windows 10S, which is going to be one of our many main stories this week. But there was also kind of a quieter release of an Echo competitor, but this one using Cortana. And of course, it's made by Harman Kardon. It's called the Harman Kardon Invoke. And it looks, other than like this blue glow on the top, like a glowing light that I guess you can press to activate Cortana or something, it looks pretty much like an Echo. I mean, it probably has a more premium speaker because it's Harman Kardon. I mean, Harman Kardon's one of those companies, granted, they don't have the luster of when they were a more independent company anymore. Like 20 years ago, 20 years ago, you know, when you were looking to get really high end, I'm not going to mention like the really like illustrious names in audio, but when you were wanting to get a high end stereo system, like for your house or whatever, or they even started to get into, you know, like decks for cars, you know, usually you thought either Harman Kardon or Onkyo. You know, those are the two companies that would come to mind as far as high end that a lot of people just completely relied on. Now there's certainly an upper echelon even from there, and I'm aware of that. But Harman Kardon was one of the big names, you know, so they have this, you know, they're kind of like Bose, where they have this, you know, sort of story. They have a narrative around their company that they, you know, release really luxurious products, you know, and high end products. And so I think it's a smart move on Microsoft's part because HP and Intel are also going to be releasing these kind of Cortana-ish, or, you know, these Cortana Echoes effectively. But you know, concentrating on Harman Kardon, okay, yeah, get on the aspirational crowd. Like, I'm not saying that this is okay. I don't want one of these damn things. Okay. Cause again, it's Internet of Targets, you know, it's just another thing to get hacked. But you know, like if you're going to try and get into this market with virtual assistants, you know, existing on a little speaker in somebody's living room or something, well, Amazon's not going for the high end, so you might as well. And Apple is way behind the times. They need to play catch up big time with this stuff. And I mean, they're already in trouble with the fact that if Google Assistant can be on Amazon devices or on Apple, you know, on iPhones and whatever else, you know, are people really going to continue to use Siri? I don't know. So they've got some catching up to do, but it's the right direction to look. You know, go for that premium market, which is something obviously Microsoft has been working on for a while now. You know, because that's where Amazon is not. They're doing the exact opposite. I've done write-ups about this that had to do with like Amazon Underground and some others where, you know, clearly, in fact, Amazon released new tablets that are like $50. You know, I mean, just really, really inexpensive. Amazon is clearly trying to hook people in, you know, in the middle class and below, right? Because the middle class is disappearing and whatever. but they're trying to, you know, really like, honestly, just latch onto the poor. That's what they're doing. You know, I'm not saying you're poor if you have an Amazon device. I mean, for fuck's sake, I have a Kindle, you know, I have a Paperwhite, but I'm just saying that like, that's the market they're kind of going after. So it's, you know, Microsoft, that's the right direction to go in. If they want to compete, is to go after the higher end. So, you know, and having Harman Kardon's name on it, yeah, that's going to do it. So I don't know if it's going to take off because how many people are really using Cortana, no matter how much they kind of update it. And I've messed with Cortana a bit. In fact, Cortana now can actually say, how can I help you, Agent Sovryn, which that's kind of fun. But again, folks, I just test these things out. You know, I don't really use them for anything important, and I, you know, burn them before I'd let them near anything that actually matters. So, but yeah, I mean, even with all the improvements, I still think it's kind of, as far as like its feature, you know, feature completeness, I really think that Cortana is still the most impressive of any of them. That includes Facebook M and whatever else. But, you know, I don't know that many people that use it and if it's really going to catch on in that way. So anyway, you know, those are coming. So the competition's on, and obviously one's going for, you know, a lower end market and the other is trying to get the high end. Boy, speaking of something, though, like a real loss in the market, or maybe the more particularly the anti-market, that is, sadly, ExtraTorrent, and that's extratorrent.cc. You know, a year, 2 years ago, was it a year ago now? Maybe a year and a half, when when Kick-Ass Torrents went down, which was kind of the last bastion of, you know, these torrent site giants. Okay, when Kick-Ass Torrents went down, there was really, you know, like, okay, we have holes that need to be filled here, right? Pirate Bay, of course, is still around and all this stuff. I'm not exactly claiming that I may know from personal knowledge of these things, but I'm just going to pretend like I do. And, you know, when Kick-Ass Torrents went down, where do you go? You know, like who can you use? And extratorrent.cc became the premier torrent site really at that point, aside from the Pirate Bay, of course. But the Pirate Bay is, you know, definitely beyond its glory days. And I say that with respect. It's just how it is. And I mean, kudos to it. It's still around after all of these, you know, Mini Nova and, I mean, go down the list that have disappeared. So ExtraTorrent, just the other day, they shut down. It was a shock. It was an absolute shock. I want to say, was that on May 12th or May? Yeah, it was like maybe it was like May 15th, I think, when it finally shut down, or May 17th, something like that. It was just a few days ago that it finally shut down. And I mean, and it came out of nowhere. So over the weekend, and this was the weekend of the 12th, there were like, you know, DDoS attacks or something. It was running very slow. There was times where the site wouldn't even come up. Then come like Monday, Tuesday, it was actually working again. And then it was either Tuesday night or that Wednesday or something. Then it just, you know, you would go to the site and there'd just be this, you know, big page that just said, we're shutting down, you know, go elsewhere. This is it. It's over. And Torrent Freak, which is a great place for getting all your torrent news. Torrent Freak, they contacted some of the, you know, people behind ExtraTorrent, shall we say, in varying degrees. And they said, oh yeah, no, it's over. It's done. You know, that this site isn't going to be a thing anymore. And yeah, now you're left with, you know, another hole to be filled. I mean, like to some degree, Kick-Ass Torrents is back, right? And you have, you know, Demonoid is still kind of out there and back, even though that went down for a while. It did finally come back. You have the one that I've talked about many times on the show, worldwidetorrents.eu, but that doesn't have the amount of, like, worldwide torrents. The main reason for using worldwide torrents is getting your hands on comic books, because NEM43 pretty much lives there. And so I think that's going to be around for a good long while. But as far as getting access to like music and all this different stuff, not exactly. I mean, it's there, and documentaries are there, porn's there, all this other stuff's there, but not, you know, it doesn't have like the raw amount of content that, like, say, ExtraTorrent would have, or that Kick-Ass Torrents would have, or that even Demonoid would have. So, you know, that's out there. So, I mean, there's some alternatives to use, and the Pirate Bay is still around and kicking, even though, you know, your ability to get to the site at any given moment is always questionable. This sucks, you know, and nobody really knows what the hell exactly happened. You know, was it because the DDoS attack was, you know, did the MPAA or the RIAA make them a deal they couldn't refuse? I mean, we don't know right now what went down, but extratorrent.cc is down. And it's, yeah, I think that's a shame, especially because, you know, one of the things about ExtraTorrent was that was a site where a lot of people would go to find a lot of independent films. And I don't mean like indie films at the Cannes Festival or something. I mean genuinely independent films made by people that, you know, whatever, that, you know, they're not like big time directors. You know, maybe they'll get like one really known name, or, you know, one kind of like C-class actor or something that people would recognize and they could be on there. But like, it was a great engine to find those things. And I think a lot of those movies, their life's blood was being found on ExtraTorrent, right? Not on YouTube, because YouTube could create a whole bunch of problems. But I mean, it was such a great way to find independent artists, to say nothing of, I mean, look, I don't believe in intellectual property in any way, shape, or form, so it doesn't matter. I didn't care about the copyrighted material myself, you know, that people were downloading it. I mean, rock and roll. But yeah, I mean, like, a lot of the positives that always disappear with the stuff, and one of the biggest positives of torrent sites is always discovery, because it is a deluge of content out there. I mean, you cannot possibly keep track of things, and torrent sites would do a better job, just by the nature of everybody working together on them, would do a better job of letting you know what's out there than any news site, you know, even what's a music news site, a movie news site, TV news site, whatever, could even dream of doing. I mean, and there's other advantages too. You know, you could own the content, but say it was DRM protected. I think DRM's bullshit straight up. And, you know, I strip it anytime I can, but it's certainly a lot easier if you buy the product because you want to support the artist or the creator or whatever. But then you can get a DRM free version right on ExtraTorrent, right? But now, you know, those abilities are gone. It's such a shame. And again, understand every time one of these things happened, every time a torrent site gets shut down, I feel like the police state, and because, you know, to enforce copyright, you have to have a police state. You understand? Like, you have to have a near perfect police state to really, really enforce copyright. I mean, that's one of the instantly unethical things about copyright law and about copywriting in general, or about copyright in general, not copywriting. That's actually a job. But, and I just, it always feels like it feels like the bad guys won every time that happens, whether you agree with torrenting or not. It really is a sign that somewhere the bad guys won, in my opinion. So anyway, that's a total loss, or a bad loss in my opinion. I don't think it'll be coming back. What else we got here? Well, speaking of DRM, what the hell? Maybe you love Netflix. Maybe you stop torrenting because, well, Netflix has your hookup. And I mean, and I get it. I've been watching Netflix quite a bit. I watched Dear White People. I thought the show was amazing. I'll be doing a review of that in the future, probably with, I won't be alone for doing that review. But that was the whole reason I got Netflix, and I've been enjoying it. But, little ugly move on Netflix's part. They have now integrated Google's DRM platform into their app to where if you have a rooted phone, you can't install the Netflix app anymore. Sucks to be you. And, I'll admit, okay, even me, a guy who's really big on taking control of my devices and everything, it's been a while since I've rooted something like that. I've really felt the need or whatever, even to do that. I don't know that many people that really do root a device unless they're going to be installing like Lineage OS or something on there. But just like somebody that just that roots a device just to do whatever, maybe get access to Wi-Fi tethering and just run stock Android. I don't know many people that do that. I mean, even like the Android diehards, and I listen to their shows, I know, and even they admit that they don't really root anymore. So this is kind of interesting. This seems to be a play to just make, for Netflix to play nice with, in this case, the Google Play Store, because that it's effectively required now. I think to some degree it always was, but yeah, now it will not work on rooted devices. And so that's going to affect, if you're using Lineage OS, which of course is a sequel to, or the new, the newest version of CyanogenMod. It's what it morphed into, morphin' time. Woo. And yeah, there you go, folks. So I don't know. I don't watch Netflix on my phone anyway. So that's not even a thing. I wouldn't have noticed if there wasn't an announcement about it. The last bit, now I'm just going to leave the link in the show notes for this to check it out. But there was an audit done, an independent audit of OpenVPN. And, the few problems that were found have been patched in the latest version of OpenVPN. I think it's version 9.4.2 or something like that. The link will be right in the show notes for this, for you to read more about it. But make sure you update OpenVPN if you need to do that, or update from your provider, however that works, or you can ask them if they have the latest updates, because there were a couple, potential exploits found, but the overall assessment is that best practices were in place with development of OpenVPN. And that's the most important. That's in some ways the most important thing. I mean, you can't stop all 0 days like that, at least not the way things are going. And so as long as an independent auditor says, okay, but they respond quickly, they respond right, they have all these systems in place, to really react and act upon, whatever new data comes their way, then that's good. And so with OpenVPN, this is a pretty solid, piece of tech. Okay. Piece of software that's out there. And you can feel a little bit more confident in using it, knowing that they passed the audit, not with 100% flying colors, but with what just about any software could possibly have as far as flying colors go. So good job, OpenVPN. Of course, I recommend that across the board, especially when you're torrenting. Do use a VPN. But all right, so that's let's get into our stories of the week. See, I told you there was so much that we had to cover and talk about. We haven't even gotten into our main stories, so let's start doing that. But before we do, of course, I want to thank one of our sponsors, and that sponsor is This is one of the coolest ones. I'll tell you, if you're loving this podcast, let me tell you about a podcast you're going to love. That podcast would be, if you're a Star Wars fan and you love liberty, you're an anarchist, all that good stuff, being into freedom and everything, this, in my opinion, this show is one of a kind. Resist the Empire. That's the name of the podcast. Resist the Empire podcast, brought to you by Pax Libertas, which they do a bunch of different podcasts. You have one of my absolute favorites, the Lava Flow podcast. I know you think the name's kind of odd. Listen to the show. It ain't odd at all. It's a straight shooter. I love it. But anyway, Resist the Empire podcast. It is Star Wars. It is freedom mixed into one. You can get all your latest Star Wars news there. I know I've been certainly relying on that because I've been a little disappointed with some of my other Star Wars podcasts lately. They've been pulling some things that I don't dig. So I'm glad that there's, good guys out there doing a great Star Wars podcast like Resist the Empire podcast. They do. In fact, here's one of the best things. I love this. They take one character from the entire Star Wars canon, which there's a lot of characters to do. And they take one and then they do like they kind of assess them under the galaxy's smallest political quiz. And you find out where they sit, politically, like where would they fit in. It's really cool. Like, I think that's a brilliant little idea. So, and again, great place to get news, get reviews of all the latest stuff. In fact, I was name dropped a couple of, I think it was like episode 7 of it. I got a nice little name drop. That was nice. And just, yeah, they're doing great work there. ResistTheEmpirePodcast.com. That's where you can find it. You want to check this podcast out. I cannot thank them enough for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. I think there's definitely a lot of cross-pollination with our audiences because, I talk Star Wars, I talk science fiction in general a whole hell of a lot. Yeah. I know it's space opera. It's not exactly, it's closer to fantasy than science fiction, blah, 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 blah. Shut up. It's in space. Okay. The term sci-fi has been dead for a long time. All right. Everybody should have ran with speculative fiction years ago anyway, the term speculative fiction. So anyway, it's a great show. ResistTheEmpirePodcast.com. Check it out. If you're into liberty, if you're into Star Wars, or if you're just into Star Wars, fucking give this thing a listen. I guarantee you're going to love it. I mean, I really do. And I've already heard from a lot of listeners of Sovryn Tech that they said they went over to it and, oh yeah, they're hooked. Like they're just instantly hooked. So check that out. And I thank them so much for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. All right, let's get into our big stories for the week because we've got a few. Now, this first story, I kind of this is going to be pretty broad ranging. 2 weeks or an episode, I guess that would have been episode 224. I did talk about it before we got into the gender subject with the lovely and hyper intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy. I talked about how there's the Microsoft Surface laptop. This is a laptop that was made by Microsoft, getting released by Microsoft, going to be officially supported by Microsoft, yada, yada. So I talked about it for a little bit there. It is definitely a premium device, but we know a lot more about it now. And a lot more about kind of the OS that it's supposed to come with. So I want to touch on that, but then it really speaks to a broader stroke, I think, that Microsoft is going for here. So I want to get into that too. Then we have like 4 or 5 other great stories to get into, and then I've got other stuff to talk about. So the Surface laptop, these are 13-inch laptops. Okay, obviously competing with MacBooks. I mean, that's apparent just by looking at it. It really has that premium style. Sort of the unique thing about it, and Evan Bloss actually just leaked pictures of the Surface Pro 5, which Microsoft will be announcing in China, I imagine, next week. Of course, they're just going to call it the Surface Pro, not the Surface Pro 5, but it's the 5th iteration anyway. And but the unique thing that the Surface laptop has is like this felt keyboard, and it's kind of this felt palm rest and everything. Like there's this soft touch to it, and the Surface Pro 5 is apparently going to have this as well, based upon the leaks from Evan Bloss. But anyway, so this is something that this is their differentiator in many ways, is that, this is going to have this really comfortable, quiet feel. And I think that's slick. And look, folks, and I'll say this right out of the gate. I am not saying use Microsoft's products. I am so not 100%. I am so on board with using Linux. I recommend Linux first and foremost. Hop on Ubuntu, do your thing. I'm a BSD boy. I mean, believe me, okay, I'm not saying use Microsoft stuff, but let's be clear here. The bulk of the world uses Microsoft. The bulk of my listenership uses Microsoft, Windows particularly. And so, to say nothing of how many people use Office in one form or fashion. So me talking about what Microsoft's doing is important because there's a chance it could be something bad, or hell, maybe it's something good. because I'm still of the opinion that one day, Windows could become a fully open source thing. But anyway, let's get into this because I think it speaks to some theories I've had over the years as well. So this is a 13-inch, laptop, has the whole business on it, has the touch screen on it, multi-point touch. It can come with an i5, Core i5 or Core i7, which, boy, that's a news story I'm not going to be able to get into. Intel apparently is going to be releasing an i9, obviously to compete with AMD's impressive Ryzen processors, but we'll have to save that for another week. And right now it's speculation. Anyway, you can get up to a 512 gigabyte solid state drive in it. And it up to like 16 gig of RAM. So now Microsoft is claiming that the Surface laptop, and it's important to note, that this is, you have Surface Book, which is effectively a laptop, but a lot of people are claiming that the Surface laptop is important because it's the first laptop ever made by Microsoft and that people have been clamoring for it. I think the Surface Book was originally the answer to that, but maybe it just didn't take off the way they wanted. So now they're making a more traditional laptop. Some people get mad about that because they say, well, the Surface line is supposed to be reference devices for new product categories. And the Surface laptop is not that. Like it is not, it's just a laptop. I think that there's a lot more at play here than that, but I'll save it after I go over, more of the specifications. So these are using Kaby Lake processors. So you're using what is effectively the latest on the market as far as that goes. And the most interesting thing, and they're lightweight, of course, and they have a lot of, like, there's ambient light sensors, a lot of the things that you would expect to find, say, in a tablet or a smartphone. A lot of these different sensors exist on the Surface laptop. And I think that there's a reason for that. And of course, there's a huge reason for the touchscreen. It can interact with the Surface Pen. You can use the Surface Dial as well with it. So it fits within the Surface line, but it gives you that more traditional form factor. I think that's the real reason they're going for it, is to get people used to using Surface devices. Not even so much laptops, but or should I say Surface accessories. I think it's to get people, kind of into that platform of getting used to using these Surface branded accessories, but giving people kind of the platform that they want to use, that being laptops, right? Because laptops, look, everybody's got a smartphone. Laptops still make the world go round. That's a fact of life. Okay. So nothing crazy, but, in that statement, nothing crazy about Microsoft wanting to make a laptop. The most, some people want to say, so Microsoft claims that they're going to, their future, this is future proof for 4 years and that they'll fully support it for 4 years. But a lot of people say, well, it's kind of looking backwards because it doesn't have USB-C. It doesn't have Thunderbolt. It just has a USB 3.0 slot. Yeah, I understand that, but this is probably in the works for a while. And I think, again, the point here is to try to get people that have been using, I don't think this is necessarily for new users. With having Windows 10S, they're certainly looking at the education market, but they're not taking on Chromebooks as far as price with these. Okay. I think they're trying to get people that have, maybe that haven't updated in a while. Their main laptop or something like that, but all their peripherals are still USB 3.0. This is their gateway drug into the Surface, market, into the Surface platform with all of its accessories and whatever else gets done, and to experience, which something I think is generally a positive. We'll talk about that more during HackSec. What it's like to get updates right away for Windows 10 from Microsoft themselves. It's very similar to the same reasons that you'd buy like a Google, like a Nexus phone or a Pixel phone, because you're going to get those updates right away, for those security updates right away from Google and all those latest features. Well, wait till you're doing that with Microsoft, and that's exactly what's going to happen here. But the big deal here is Windows 10S, and that this is really the reference device for Windows 10S, which, I want to break into. So Windows 10S is, and I've already briefly mentioned this in the past couple episodes. It is, it's the Chromebook competitor version of Windows. It's Windows Cloud, which we've talked about for some months, but this is the actual name for it, is Windows 10S instead of Windows Cloud. And it is a version of Windows. It is effectively full on Windows 10, except for the fact that it doesn't run Win32 apps. And it doesn't apparently run converted, through the desktop bridge, right? Software that's available to where you can convert, your regular Win32 desktop software. You can convert it into a UWP. It won't run those converted ones either. It only runs software that is that was made as a UWP from the ground up. At least that's what's being told and sold right now. So the big push here is the UWP platform. Now, frankly, when you consider, and some of this we'll get into later, like the ransomware and a lot of the malware going around and things like this, UWP is a brilliant idea. In fact, last week, I think we mentioned CubesOS, where this is a version of Linux where every piece of software that you use within Linux or within CubesOS is sandboxed, meaning that it doesn't interact or affect any other piece of software or the operating system itself in general, when you open it. And this is a great security move. Okay. And obviously one of the things, one of the stigmas that Microsoft and Windows in particular has had for a very long time is issues with security, with exploits and all this stuff. Forever. It's like, well, Apples don't get viruses. Now, of course, that's not true anymore. It hasn't been true for a long time. But I mean, it's also another reason people are big on Linux because it's more secure and all this stuff. And so Microsoft, I think rightfully so, sees a need to, we got to tighten up the chip. We got to tighten up Windows, and make it so that way, people can't make this claim that it's an insecure platform anymore, especially in our modern day. And as we go on in this episode, you're going to find out maybe why they feel that even more so and that they're really taking that stance. So UWP is an answer for that. Windows 10S being limited in what it can do, much like a Chromebook, like Chrome OS is limited in what it can do, is an answer for these sorts of things. It really is. It effectively says that, yeah, you're limited, but your limitations is what's going to make this, really secure. Now, not everybody's jumping on board with UWP, admittedly. I mean, what I mean by not everybody, users aren't necessarily jumping on board with it, but also a lot of companies, a lot of developers aren't really jumping on board with it. Probably the biggest one to do so would be Adobe. They have already started, they've released like express versions of some of their apps, not Premiere, unfortunately, but Photoshop and the like, they've all, they've released some of those as UWP apps. I mean, and I look at my own, as far as UWP apps, and which UWP stands for Universal Windows Platform. And you can only get these apps through the Windows Store. So that's another thing too. I mean, understand that me as a user, I don't like this idea in the abstract. I like the idea of apps being sandboxed, but I don't like that I can't get it from independent sources, that I can only get them from the Windows Store, and that, Microsoft is a huge bottleneck here effectively. That is a huge problem. I am not pretending otherwise. But, I use a lot of UWP apps on my Windows machine. Again, I use more than just a Windows machine. But, like the Audible app is really slick. Even the version, a funny thing, there's some others that I use that are pretty, interesting. I've used Windows Maps on here. I use the Skype UWP app now pretty much exclusively because there's really and I talked about this in the past when I reviewed Windows 10S, there's no reason not to, and all the latest features are going into that anyway. To be able to record with Skype on something, on a Windows machine with the desktop app, they have to go through such a rigmarole. There's no point to using the potential more open platform of the desktop app. You might as well use the sandboxed, UWP app, in that case. So, one of the ones though that I think where you see the limitations of this is VLC. That's the video player. They've had a UWP app for a while, and boy, do you miss the customizability. It's just not there, and I think that's the nature of the platform. Like the customizability of the full-on desktop version of it, the things you can add, the way you can rearrange the user interface and everything, is just not there, and it's such a pity. So you definitely see where for power users, this is not going to be okay. But again, we know now that if you get a Surface laptop, or whatever Surface device happens to come with Windows 10S, you can for free, at least we know up until 2018, you can get a free upgrade to Windows 10 Pro. And actually they've already came out and said too, that if you use ease of access devices, like for, various handicaps or whatever, that you can also, for the lifetime of your device, you can automatically upgrade to Windows 10 Pro. If you miss the 2018 deadline and you're not using the ease of access, software, then, or hardware or whatever, then it's like $50 to upgrade, which is a pretty severe discount for a Windows license. But anyway, so that, I think a lot of people will probably end up doing that. I mean, this is going to be their way of really being able to tell how many people actually use UWP. What is the viability of this? Windows 10S could very much just be a test platform. as far as how all this goes, to see like, can this really work? Can people really exist within this? Because what I think is really coming down the line. So again, UWP's existence is totally about, in my opinion, about, securing Windows, about getting rid of that stigma around Microsoft that their products are inherently insecure. They really want to put a stop to that. And of course, also they get to, when they sell software, through the Windows Store, they can get a cut of the margins, or, you know what I mean? A cut of the sales, kind of like, just the wild amount of money that, that Apple makes off of its app stores. Right. So certainly same principle there. Now, one of the big problems, I want to talk about what's going to come, in the future, for this. But the Surface laptop, as far as like hardware goes, it looks fine to me. Like I think I believe the 4-year, future proofing, other than the USB-C thing. Otherwise, yeah, I think it could easily handle that. And especially if it's using, Windows 10S, then you can easily say that, oh yeah, we can support this for 4 years, just like Google supports Chromebooks, every new Chromebook model for 5 years after the model comes out. So yeah, I believe that. Now, one of the initial concerns that people had with Windows 10S and the fact that it can't run Win32 apps is that the two most used pieces of software on Windows computers are not made by Microsoft. It's Google Chrome and it's iTunes, Apple's iTunes. Like it or not, that's how it is. Those are, by a long shot, the two most used pieces of software on Windows computers. Those are both Win32 apps. Okay. iTunes has already come out and said that, yep, we're going to support Windows 10S, or, Apple has come out and said, we'll support Windows 10S. We're going to release an iTunes app for UWP. Now, personally, I actually support this because the iTunes, software is such a dog. And I mean that in a bad way. Like, it is just so slow. It is such a piece of shit for it to be a, light, fast, sandboxed, UWP app. Awesome. Especially also remember, we talked about this maybe about a year ago, where there was the QuickTime exploits that were built into iTunes, or they weren't intentionally built into, but they were part of iTunes, and they were getting plugged on Apple, on Mac OS, right? But Apple wasn't doing anything about it on Windows, and they just left these two huge, security exploits wide open. They were bad ones. And I thought that was the shittiest thing, that Apple had ever done as a company. Just unbelievable. Really, it's certainly way up there. And so if they're going to have a UWP app, good, then that sort of thing doesn't have to be worried about. Now, yes, there have been exploits that allow for, malware of a type to get out of the UWP platform. I'm aware of that, but this is definitely a huge step, in the right direction. The part that's not right about it, and this speaks to the second piece of software that really for I think Windows 10S to be 100% viable needs to be, that is Google Chrome. So iTunes is solved. That's going to be there. There's other, Spotify, a whole bunch of people. WhatsApp has even said that they're releasing a UWP app. So a lot of people are going to jump on board with this, but the part where it's going to become a problem is with web browsers. Okay. And the reason that this is, we now know it's a totally technical limitation. It cannot be done. It can, but it would require, for other browsers, because that's the thing, Windows 10S is only going to have really one browser. There's other browsers in the Windows Store, but what you find out is that they're all using the same HTML engine. They're all using the same Edge HTML engine. So you're really using the same browser. Even if they're slightly different ones, you're still really just using a different version, like a different colored version of Edge. So for Opera, for Firefox, for which Opera's had some interesting updates lately, but that seems to happen every year. But anyway, for Opera, for Firefox, and for Google Chrome, they would have to run on Windows 10S. The way things are right now, and there has been no news of a change coming, they would have to completely rewrite those web browsers to use the Edge HTML engine. And they couldn't use their own. Right now, they use their own. And, you can't just port it. They have to use Edge HTML. This is going to be a big problem. Google Chrome may never. Firefox may never. Go down the list. They may never, ever end up working on Windows 10S. And honestly, that could kill Windows 10S. Now, admittedly, Google's kind of doing the same thing where they're removing features from Windows implementations of your, Windows versions of Google Chrome. right? Like the apps are going to go away, not the extensions, but the apps will no longer be available on Windows after in 2018, I think is when they kill that. So this is kind of a battle going both ways. It's not like Microsoft's just being an ass. Certainly Google's pulling features as well. But this is a huge deal. People are going to have to use Edge. Now, I'm not saying that that's inherently a bad thing. If you're on the Windows platform, understand Edge is, for what it is, it's a great web browser. There's some features missing. It doesn't handle certain websites right. There are little problems here and there, but a lot of its back end and, it's new code and a lot of its new features, it's really slick shit. And they're doing the same sandboxing and everything. In fact, they're even, we've talked about this before, where Edge, at least they're starting to, in enterprise solutions, it's starting to run in a virtual machine, not just completely sandbox. It's running in its own fucking virtual machine. That's great. That is the right moves, and it's a fast web browser. Okay, and in most of the extensions, you have uBlock Origin and all this different stuff, that are available for it, So, it's getting there. So, I think Windows 10S could do it, but we're going to be losing some, whoever's using it is going to end up losing some features. Somehow I get the sense that a lot of people are just going to say, yeah, give me Windows 10 Pro already. I don't know if this is exactly going to pull off, but because what's coming, what in my opinion, what I think is on the way, for, Microsoft's plans for Windows in general is they are looking at doing, and they've kind of talked about this before. They are looking at doing the Surface phone. Okay. Satya Nadella said, oh yeah, we're still going to make phones, but it's not going to be what you think. It's not going to look like any phone now. And that's it. I think Microsoft's real plan here, and this is part of it with Windows 10S and also why they're trying to get Windows 10 to run on ARM, or why they have gotten it to run on ARM devices, is that at some point they're going to have a device, whatever that device may be, that will be able to, with Continuum, which is what allows a mobile device to turn into a desktop with Windows 10 Mobile, right? They're not going to use Windows 10 Mobile. It's going to be full on Windows 10, maybe Windows 10S, and they're going to have it to where this device can just connect to whatever hardware and situation you happen to find yourself in at the time. So you're going to have like this, I'm going to guess it's going to be this little mini clamshell laptop, like something that a lot of, hackers, and I say that positively, have been devising for themselves forever. Like it's always been the dream machine. And I think eventually that's what Microsoft's really going to, going to be releasing here. And that's what their Surface phone is going to be. It's going to be this PC that can do everything a PC can, but it's going to have all these cellular abilities. And that's what the Surface, line is eventually going to end up at, is this little device that can just connect to different hardware and, has its proprietary connector, right? Like Surface Connect, which is what all the Surface devices have, even the Surface laptop. So I think that's the direction they're going, but UWP has its problems and it has its advantages. One of the big things that's going to be, a huge question, how are games going to work out as far as this goes? Is Steam going to create a UWP app, and will they be able to run full on games within kind of the UWP, within that platform? I don't know. I don't know that that's going to work out. So maybe there will always be, and this is the point, that something I theorized for a while, is I've said that eventually Microsoft is going to, they're not just going to offer these versions of, Windows 10 for free. Eventually they are going to have another operating system. I think they're going to have like a subscription based, which you can actually do subscription based. If you're in an enterprise, situation, you can purchase Windows 10 on a subscription base. I forget what the pricing was, but we talked about this. And I think eventually maybe the operating system will get to that kind of pricing model, to where you will pay, to have access, to this operating, to a higher end version of Windows or something like that. Like I've talked about Midori in the past. And it's funny because they're already kind of selling people on this lower version of Windows. And then there's going to be, this more full on version of Windows. So I could see that still kind of happening, to where, yeah, they're not going to give Windows away for free forever. Eventually you're going to, pay in somehow, with this, but they got to get everybody kind of hooked into it and used to using it, in very different ways. So, interesting outlooks, kind of on the future here, as far as what they have planned for Windows. Again, I wouldn't be shocked if Windows 10S never takes off, because the biggest thing that Microsoft's main reason for, or Windows' main reason for existence right now is gaming, just straight up like that. That's a fact of life. And so, if Windows 10S isn't going to be able to really do that, then it's not, I don't think it's really going to take off. So, all right, let's get into another one of our main stories for this week. And whoo, boy, is this a big one. And something that really, even all the security that we talked about that UWP could add in for Windows 10S and all that, that I don't even think that could address. And just one last comment on Windows 10S. The average person, like the Windows Store offers all of the software that really they could need. It really does. So I think the average person really could get on board with it. But the average person does use Windows, but I think the person that really spends money on the PC, market and on Windows and all that, they're the kind that don't actually use it. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Obviously Windows 10S is never going to get deployed in enterprise. I mean, like that's not, at least not as like a server of some kind. I mean, maybe the average, maybe when Windows 10S devices that can compete with Chromebooks come out and all that, yeah, that'll be a thing. They'll be in schools, and workers will probably use them. Of course, that's where Surface Phone would kind of come in. But yeah, I think where the money is, I don't know. It's going to be hard to imagine whether or not Windows, if Windows 10S will actually take off, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong about that. Anyway, Windows 10S would not solve this problem. This was a huge, huge deal. So this has to do with Intel processors. Okay. Now here's the thing. There's not a whole lot you can really do about what I'm about to, that anybody can really do about what I'm about to tell you about. Manufacturers either have to update the firmware for, like at the deepest level. Okay. To fix this, which I think I have a Dell Inspiron 15. It's the 7559. They pushed out an update, a major update last week. And I think that actually, I think that update was in reference to trying to solve this problem with Intel processors, because I'm running a Core i7 here. It's Skylake, it's not Kaby Lake, but this does affect Kaby Lake as well. Pretty much what I'm about to talk about affects every Intel processor from Sandy Bridge, from like 2008 to now. From Sandy Bridge to Kaby Lake. Will the next generation of Intel processors fix this? Yeah, of course. I'm sure they're working very hard on it. But this is crazy. This has to do with, and this was a scary piece of software. So back in 2007, this is just as Sandy Bridge was coming out. Okay, now I've talked about computers on this show called Libreboot. Okay, and you can get them from minifree.org. In this past week's Patreon Q&A, I actually gave a full breakdown of what was happening with Libreboot and what's going on, because I talked about it a few weeks ago on Sovryn Tech on a main episode like this one, where, I said, it's like, I don't know what's going on there, but they are apparently fixing kind of these potentially backdoors and closed source aspects of Intel's processors and their firmware, and I don't know how exactly they're doing it. Well, what they were getting rid of, and the reason that they were only offering, why Libreboot was only working on machines that were, say, like 2009 and back, was because they didn't have this little special mechanism, this little separate chip that's called, AMT, or Active Management Technology, I think, or ME, which is the Intel, the management engine. I think the other day I was calling it the media engine, but it's the management engine. And more particularly, I think this is in reference to vPro, which is this system that Intel implements with their processors that allows you to do a lot of different things, like wake on LAN, allow you to have, especially in an enterprise environment, it allows you to take control, even if the computer's off, frankly, it allows you to take control, of the PC. Now, back when this was first announced, in fact, I remember, like, at the time I would, here and there, I would read InfoWars. This would be back 07, 08. And I remember InfoWars even saying, it's like, this is crazy. It's like, oh, Sandy Bridge, the NSA's in it and blah, 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 blah. Well, honestly, they kind of were. I mean, actually, in a very real sense, they were, because the NSA has worked with all of the major operating systems in creating, quote unquote, more secure versions of these operating systems. That includes Linux as well as FreeBSD, by the way, in case you're wondering. The SE Linux was worked on in conjunction with the NSA. That's a fact. That I didn't get that from InfoWars either. That's knowledge. Okay, like that's out there. But yeah, I remember at the time InfoWars was saying, don't buy Sandy Bridge computers. There's a backdoor. There's this secret, chip in there that could do everything, listen to everything, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of people said, yeah, okay, well, I'm not going to do that. In fact, when I first moved to New Hampshire, I specifically bought a computer that wasn't the last, version of a laptop, of a gaming laptop that wasn't Sandy Bridge, because I recognized exactly what was going on here with this management engine, that this would be this Intel ME, that would be a genuine issue. And now, guess what, everybody? I was right. I hate to say it. InfoWars is right. A lot of these other people were right. This thing was an absolute backdoor. And I mean, there was the potential for a massive exploit here. So yeah, all of these x86 and of course x64, processors, or well, Intel doesn't call them x64. It's more of an AMD thing, but all these x86 processors, they all have that secret powerful little control, mechanism. It runs on a completely separate chip. Nobody can audit it. Nobody can examine it. It's just there. And I mean, because nobody can really audit it or even know what makes them up. I mean, anything that if any, in any way that they're ever compromised, I mean, it's effectively unkillable to do that. Like if there's a rootkit attack or something like that, you can't even detect it, let alone try and do something about it. That's why Libreboot actually exists, because it's this open source firmware where, you have absolute control of the device right down to the BIOS level. And so, this ME, again, the management engine subsystem, has been, well, this is really bad because researchers have now proven that you can inject a rootkit into the Intel management engine. And because this is something that exists completely outside of the operating system, any security software that, even a lot of security professionals probably don't even run. Because of that, you have a rootkit, you have malware that has complete control over your machine and it can't even be detected. This is so bad. This is the problem when you don't have open source hardware along with open source software, is because these kinds of things can exist without you ever knowing, without anybody ever knowing. Did Microsoft even know about this? Probably not. Did the boys at Linux know about this? The boys and gals and invited transgender species there know about this? Probably not. I mean, this is really fucking bad. This is as bad as it gets because it's right at the processor level. This is what they call ring 3. Okay. Even though this is this is all, encrypted, cryptographically protected and everything, the RSA 2048, once you get in, you've got total access to the machine. I mean, this is just about as bad as it fucking gets. I mean, there's so much wrong with how they set this up. There's a whole bunch of other issues with it. But this is why I have been recommending for years, and it's been in the appendix of the show notes, to buy Libreboot computers. Okay. Now also, I've been informed that the computers from Purism, those also are not, they've effectively, managed the management engine from Intel, and they've made it so that it doesn't affect the rest of the machine. So, so both the Purism laptops and the Libreboot laptops, they're the only ones that are not affected by this. And this is, it's OS agnostic. It doesn't matter. It's this only affects Windows. No, motherfucker, it doesn't. It affects everything. And yeah, now finally manufacturers are pushing out, some updates for this, but not all. I mean, there's a laundry list of computers. I mean, this affects thousands, if not millions of machines. This is really, really bad stuff. But here's the thing, other than throwing out your computer and getting a Libreboot or a Purism laptop, or waiting for, the 8th generation, or for the i9, or the 8th generation Intel chip or something, you either have to make sure that you can get an update that fixes this from the manufacturer, say from Lenovo, Dell, or HP or something, or you're screwed. I mean, you're just screwed. I mean, that doesn't mean that you have a rootkit, but the potential's there and your computer could just be, completely taken over. So, I mean, this is really, really ugly stuff. Now, I don't need to spend a whole bunch more time on that, breaking down, because really it's not in your hands. There's nothing for you to do other than contacting your computer manufacturer and asking if they have an update available. So anyway, let's move on, because we've got a bunch of stories like this that I need to get into, and I still want to have some fun talking about some more enjoyable stuff in this episode. So you can see why I'm not even bothering taking a break, because holy shit, there's so much to cover here. But just real quick, I do want to break into telling you about something that really can't be hacked because it doesn't have a processor at all. In fact, it's just a good solid blocker coin, that being precious metals, gold, silver, platinum, palladium, all the good stuff. And if you want to get your hands on some, and boy, maybe you're worried somebody got access to your Bitcoin wallet or something because of this little, management engine backdoor rootkit problem. Well, maybe real quick, No, I'm not telling you to do this. I'm making a joke for or quasi joke for an ad. But maybe real quick, use that Bitcoin and buy some gold and silver with it that can't be hacked, because they are a Bitcoin preferred business. See, it's not like you don't need to, you shouldn't trust Bitcoin. Quite the opposite. In fact, you want to deal with businesses that want to, that accept Bitcoin, and they trade you value for value. And that's what you're getting here. You could use Bitcoin to get your hands on some gold and silver. How much better can it get? Because you want to diversify your wealth, especially when shit like this happens. When you find out about this sort of thing, it's like, oh, well, maybe I'll, make sure some of my money's okay and it's not actually on my computer by having some gold and silver in my hand. And that's what you can do through Roberts and Roberts Brokerage. They are one of the best businesses in the world. You want to deal with them. Like I said, they are a Bitcoin preferred business. Not everybody can say that. And they are going to hook you up, and they will hook you up fast. As they've been a long time sponsor of Sovryn Tech, I'm really honored to be able to say that. And so Roberts and Roberts Brokerage, get your hands on gold, silver, platinum, palladium, all the kind of stuff you want. They'll even buy some of it from you. Just talk to them, and believe me, they're the nicest people in the world. Roberts and Roberts Brokerage, go to rrbi.co. Let them know the Golden Stallion sent you, or you can go to gold.zog.ninja. That'll let them know right away. But do that. Get your hookup, diversify your wealth, get some of that real cold storage. Don't count on Intel for cold storage, baby. Do it with Roberts and Roberts Brokerage. Get your hands on that gold and silver. So anyway, all right, let's move on here, because we still got a ton to cover. And I didn't even get into the Gmail phishing scam, in the Google Drive phishing scam. But oh man, all I'm going to say is this: there was a phishing scam going around. There was a link that a lot of people, clicked on because it looked like it came from a friend or whatever. I keep telling you, Google services are just too hot a target. Do your best to get away from them entirely if you can. So I know it's hard, and it's getting harder, but try to, because it's such a hot target for, bad actors, malicious, individuals and groups. So anyway, okay. Talking about something malicious, though, really, I'll admit, I don't know that this was malicious. I know some people want to say it was. This really had all the hallmarks. As somebody myself who has worked at tech companies, I've had to deal with firmware issues and things like this. I know how this kind of situation goes. I really don't think this was malicious, but it is bullshit, and it is an atrocity, that happened to quite a few thousand computers at least. And this has to do with HP. Now, this is a shame, because HP and Dell, those have kind of been the two top companies, in my opinion, in the past couple of years, as far as producing really high quality, laptops, especially ones that work very well with Linux, particularly in Dell's case. Microsoft is obviously getting in the game of making high quality laptops, but, well, they've still got to earn their chops, in my opinion. So, but HP, I've been recommending HP without reservation. Same with Dell. I think they've been coming out with some great computers as late. Really great computers as late for what they are. And just last week, I guess this would have been last week, because there's a big update about on May 11th. So it would have been last Thursday. It was discovered that there was a keylogger built into an audio driver on a lot of HP laptops. So I'm going to read a little bit of the story here from Windows Central, who I love Windows Central, because a bunch of left libertarian anarchists over there, or at least the guy that runs it is. So I like to give him a little credit. But anyway, here's the original story before there was an update, because as of May 11th, patches for this have been rolling out from HP. So likely if you've run your HP update, like they have the little action center, right, that does the updates, not necessarily through, Windows, the Windows 10 update. They have been rolling out the patches for this, so it's already being fixed. But let's read just a little bit about it. If you own an HP laptop, you might want to check that your keystrokes aren't being logged. According to Swiss security firm Mod0, an audio driver included in a number of HP Elite books, Pro books, Z books, and Elites contain a keylogger. The Spectre line is not listed there. Just Stallion putting that out. Though there's no indication that it's backed by any malicious intent. I agree with that assessment. Let's read on. According to Mod0, the keylogger was included in a driver for an audio chip produced by Connexent that is included in the HP models in question. From Mod0, quote, Connexent is a manufacturer of integrated circuits emerging from a U.S. Armaments manufacturer. Boo. Primarily, they develop circuits in the field of video and audio processing. Thus, it is uncommon for Connexent audio ICs to be populated on the sound cards of computers of various manufacturers. This is true. Normally, you have Realtek, right? Or you have like Intel's own little systems. Usually has some kind of onboard audio chip. The days of like separate sound cards, like from Creative, the Sound Blaster Pro or the Sound Blaster 16, those days are kind of gone, as hard as they try with their Zi-Fi line. But anyway, Conexon also develops drivers for its audio chips so that the operating system is able to communicate with the hardware. Apparently, there are some parts for the control of the audio hardware which are very specific and depend on the computer model. For example, special keys for turning on or off a microphone or controlling the recording LED on the computer. In this code, which seems to be tailored to HP computers, there is a part that intercepts and processes all keyboard input. Actually, the purpose of the software is to recognize whether a special key has been pressed or released. Instead, however, the developer has introduced a number of diagnostic and debugging features to ensure that all keystrokes are either broadcasted through a debugging interface or written to a log file in a public directory on the hard drive. The report goes on to note that the logger has been present since at least Christmas 2015, but a more recent version of the program records all keystrokes in a log file found at c:\users/public/mictray.log. The log file is erased each time you log out of your PC, but it still presents a massive problem if things like passwords are recorded and the log file is inadvertently backed up. Mod Zero says, which it would be, like on CrashPlan or Carbonite or something like that, that log file would be backed up, and somebody offsite effectively could have access to all of your passwords, because this log file, and this is Stanley telling you this log file is all in plain text. It wasn't even encrypted. Now, I think that's kind of, that's the part where I'm like, okay, I get it. You probably screwed up. You left a debugger, a debugging firmware, installed that you're probably testing out machines with, which would explain why it was, going as far back as 2015 or whatever. And this is only on enterprise software where you're doing like different tests of a kind. So I kind of get that, because, this isn't on the NV line. This isn't like necessarily on the Spectre line, which, serve two different demographics. This is mainly on the Elite books and all that, which are all enterprise computers. But yeah, so, I can really see how this flub was made. It's not hard to imagine how that happened. And this is something like, so, for example, Lenovo had that issue with Superfish, if you remember, where that was actually AdTech. This isn't AdTech. This is just a different set of firmware, for the audio card, or for the audio chipset, I should say. Superfish was like AdTech that was built in, that it really only worked if you were running Windows. And of course, this would also be true for HP, because for these HP devices or computers, if you were running Linux on them, the log file wouldn't be made, because, there wouldn't be a place to store it. And the debugging software was obviously, or at least as far as I can tell, was made to work with, with Windows more than anything, which of course, when you're in an enterprise environment, most of the time you're using Windows. But the same issue happened with Superfish, where there was this AdTech that was broadcasting and could bypass all kinds of security certificates. It was really, really ugly what was going on with Superfish. And at the time, I was like, look, fucking boycott Lenovo. And I'm not feeling so harsh now, but at the time I really felt that way. I would not make the same claim with what happened with HP, that you need to boycott them. This was dumb. This was careless, but this also wasn't on purpose, meaning Superfish was on purpose AdTech. It was on purpose, to feed advertisers information about you. I don't think this was on purpose, and the fixes are already going out. It's pretty much every HP computer out there is probably already, has already been repaired about this. But potentially it was very, very bad, because this is a plain text file that was collecting every single keylog you made. Why was it collecting keylogs? Like they said, it was for special keys. Like when you hit, the function key, FN and then F11, and that mutes your computer or something, right? Or whatever, combination of keys you hit. That way the sound card knows, okay, turn off. So yeah, it makes sense that it does this, that it does log to some degree certain keys, but really it should only be say the function keys. It shouldn't be every fucking key, which is what this debugging firmware was doing. So it's updated. I just want to put it out there. I know that story, went around, and I was pissed. I thought, this is really just laziness and ineptitude. But I don't think it's maliciousness. I really don't. You could say that, well, this is the NSA's way or Russia's way or some other, government organization or something, or government, wanting to spy on all these different enterprise environments. You can make that claim, but the way that this was all done, I don't see it. I don't think that there's any grand conspiracy here, really to be had. So that's the HP story. Again, don't want to spend a ton of time on that, because we got other ones to get into. In fact, the biggest one here is WannaCry. and holy fucking shit. Okay. We need to talk about this one. So, and I'm actually going to read from Gizmodo here just to give us the overview of what exactly happened. Then we're going to break this down. But bottom line, just real quick, WannaCry is ransomware that, it's spread, like, I think it infected, thousands of computers, and if not millions, and it was something like 99 countries. I mean, this thing was crossing oceans. This is really, really something. And there's so much to say here. Let me start reading. So it happened on May 12th, last Friday. Today, and here's the title of the story, today's massive ransomware attack was mostly preventable. And now I put a bunch of links in the show notes. I mean, folks, there's not a whole lot you can do. Security patches are being brought up by Microsoft. Actually, security patches for this whole ransomware thing, I want to describe more of what was happening, but Microsoft already patched it 2 months ago. It's one of the things we talked about that the Shadow Brokers released. Remember, there's the episode that Shadow Brokers and Prison Breakers was the name of the episode, where, I talked about all the different exploits that Shadow Brokers, which is this quote unquote hacker group, supposedly that leaked, some NSA tools, some of which were interesting, some that weren't. I guess this would have fallen under one of the more interesting ones, but this is something that Microsoft had already patched on Windows 10. But a lot of people haven't updated. I understand why people don't update. I'm not insulting anyone for not updating, and I'm not going to blame the victim here. Okay, at least not entirely. But anyway, all right. Let me read some of this here. So ransomware may be mostly thought of as a sometimes costly nuisance, but when it hinders the ability of doctors and nurses to provide aid to those in need of emergency medical care, then it qualifies as armed robbery. On Friday, that'd be May 12th, a quickly spreading nasty piece of malware crossed mountains and oceans to infect more than 70,000 machines around the world in a matter of hours. Among those infected were more than a dozen hospitals in England, a telecom in Spain, FedEx's offices in the United Kingdom, and apparently the Russian Interior Ministry. Within half a day, there were instances detected on 6 continents. What's sad is that this was all largely preventable. Had more Windows users simply installed the security patch Microsoft released for it 2 months ago, unless you're one of the 8.45% of users still running Windows XP, which hasn't been supported for 3 years. Here's what, even though I think they're even pushing out an update for XP now as well. But anyway, here's what happened. Unknown attackers deployed a virus targeting Microsoft servers running the file sharing protocol server message block, just the SMB service. So you probably see that little acronym come up a lot if you're digging any deeper than the surface, no pun intended, on Microsoft Windows. Only servers that weren't updated after March 14th with the MS17010 patch were affected. This patch resolved an exploit known as External Blue, once a closely guarded secret of the NSA, which was leaked last month by the Shadow Brokers, blah, blah, blah. The ransomware, aptly named WannaCry, because it makes you want to cry, right, did not spread because of people clicking on bad links. The only way to prevent this attack was to have already installed the update. Through the External Blue exploit, the malware installed an NSA backdoor, an NSA exploited designed zero-day backdoor payload called Double Pulsar, and through it went WannaCry, spreading rapidly and automatically to the other computers on the same network, potentially hundreds at a time. Quote, whereas ransomware such as Locky normally requires user interaction, such as opening a Word document, WannaCry has the capability to spread automatically, end quote, Alien Vault threat engineer Chris Dorman told Gizmodo. Quote, thankfully, a weakness in the method of propagation has allowed researchers to take control of a piece of attacker infrastructure and limit new infections. It could have been a lot worse, end quote. Unfortunately, it looks like attacks might make some serious bread for their efforts. Okay, now let me stop here on all that. You get the basic gist of what went down as far as all of this goes. So how this would work is that you would receive an email. Now, normally, kind of like that Gmail or that Google Drive phishing attack that was going around a couple weeks ago, normally you'd have to click on a link and that would then do the install. Here's the thing. With Eternal Blue, okay, this NSA designed bit of kit, okay, they would, it would, if you just clicked on the email, if the email came to your machine, it would be able to, in the background, because it'd be encrypted, nothing would detect it, and it would just automatically install on your machine, and then you're fucked. Okay, now, again, if you were running Windows 10, which automatically updates, and this kind of speaks well of Microsoft's, recent, what do they call it, WAS, WAAS, Windows as a Service, right? It kind of speaks well of their, forcing you to get updates, because 2 months ago, your computer would have been updated, right? And you would have been okay. And if you're running Windows 10, now with Windows 7, that wouldn't have been possible. With Windows XP, it's a whole other fucking can of worms that are, painfully obvious. Okay. But Windows 10 would already, and in fact, Windows Defender is the only antivirus software, it's the only security software that would detect WannaCry. Okay. It even calls it WannaCry. Like, that's how long they've known about this through the shadow brokers. I mean, again, and this is a point I brought up in that episode of Sovryn Tech, Shadow Brokers and Prison Breakers. How exactly did Microsoft have access to information about, like, say, the WannaCry exploit 2 months, or actually in this case, it would have just been a month before the shadow brokers actually released, released all these tools to let people know about them? That's a huge question. So, but once it's out there, well, then somebody took advantage of it. And this is what happened on May 12th. We end up with WannaCry. But again, and look, automatic updates are a two-edged sword, because you could get updates that just as well, because you can't stop them, could be malicious in intent. Either it could be to spy on you, to target you as an individual. You could get like an individual update. And, oh yeah, that's possible. Okay. Or, it could just be like, it could be an update that could break your system because you're using, a type of hardware that Microsoft didn't plan on or something. There are issues with the, kind of this automatic update, problem, or forcing updates upon you. But again, the flip side of that is that if you are forced updates, and it's an update that fixes, that keeps something like WannaCry from spreading to, thousands or millions of systems, and to literally, 6 continents, then yeah, that speaks very well of what Microsoft has in mind, and with their idea of wanting to skewer everything up, like we talked about earlier with Windows 10s, where everything's being sandboxed, or where, yeah, it's limiting the machine, or like in the case of automatic updates, sure, you can't stop the updates, but that fact would have forced you to have the updates. And, if everybody was on Windows 10 and everybody had their automatic update, and everything was updated, this couldn't have happened. None of this would have happened. So this is a big deal. Now, what would happen is that when it would install, it would effectively lock you out of your, of getting access to your files in your machine. Okay. And it would come up with, a little message that said, pay us this much, and you'd give a Bitcoin address. And I think it was like $300. It was approximately it was like $260 or something like that. It was approximately $300 that you had to pay to whoever these attackers were, that launched WannaCry. And the funny thing is that they're apparently not making a whole ton of money. They're really not. And that's kind of ironic. Now, there was one fix that they figured out, I think over last weekend. Okay. That would have been like the 13th, 14th, but then that fix did not last long, because just like effectively another version of WannaCry, started, or an updated version of WannaCry started spreading, as I understand it. Then there was a fix just a couple days ago, I think on Thursday, which would have been with the 18th, that was released, but it would only work. It would allow you to get access to your files back. It would get rid of WannaCry out of your system, but it's only if you didn't reboot your system since WannaCry infected it, which, I mean, probably the instant a lot of people got the WannaCry, exploit, they probably tried restarting their computer right away to see if it would make it go away. So I don't imagine that this little fix is going to help out, but it has to get fixed in the RAM. Thing is, whenever you restart a computer, your RAM resets. So that's why it has to be that this fix only works if you haven't rebooted your computer yet. But let's talk about the level of this. They're not making a ton of money. Some people have kind of conspiracy theories around that. I've heard one conspiracy theory that Microsoft themselves released WannaCry to get everybody on board with Windows 10 for the very reasons that I'm talking about. I don't know. And the reason I don't buy into that conspiracy theory is because Microsoft had some really fucking harsh words to the U.S. government, to the NSA themselves, saying, and rightfully so, that the real problem here is that the NSA and that the government is hoarding these zero-day exploits, is hoarding these tools, they're not releasing to the companies to say, hey, here's how you have to plug this. And, let's put this in some degree of perspective. This is arguably, and I emphasis on the word arguably, this is arguably the worst cyber attack in history. Arguably. I mean, this is huge. This is one of those events that happens where, that people, like, honestly, unfortunately myself as well, have been saying for a while, look, at some point there's going to be a cyber attack that's going to affect, it's going to affect, shipping, like FedEx, right? That's one of the things that were attacked. It's going to end up affecting government, like the Russian ministry, which I have a comment on that I don't think it affected them that much. I talked about this like 5 years ago on Sovereign Tech, that, the Russian government was actually going back to passing important information via typewriter. Like, they literally bought a bunch of typewriters and they were handing those, they're doing things by, good old fashioned memo. So I don't know that it's going to affect Russia that much, but whatever, supposedly it did affect government services there. It affected hospitals. There were surgeries that were backed up because entire hospitals were infected with this. This is it's not as bad as it can get, but it is the prelude to how bad it can get. This is really fucking serious. And kudos, honestly, to Microsoft for coming out, being very open, having one of their, not just their PR department. Okay. It's their chief legal officer, but Brad Smith came right out and said, what the hell, I'm going to read a little bit from him. So, quote, "This is an emerging pattern in 2017. We have seen vulnerabilities stored by the CIA show up on WikiLeaks, and now this vulnerability stolen from the NSA has affected customers around the world. Repeatedly, exploits in the hands of governments have leaked into the public domain and caused widespread damage. An equivalent scenario with conventional weapons would be the U.S. military having some of its Tomahawk missiles stolen. And this most recent attack represents a completely unintended but disconcerting link between the two most serious forms of cybersecurity threats in the world today: nation-state action and organized criminal action." Woo! There you go. You have, and again, far stronger words than Apple ever fucking dreamed of saying. This is the second time Microsoft has done this, because Microsoft versus DOJ, right? Where they took them full on and said, we don't understand what the difference is between a letter, a handwritten, handheld letter, and an email. You can't just go searching through people's letters, just like we don't think you should be able to go searching through email. They won their case. Okay, that had to do with that server in Ireland, right? Of course, Microsoft's not sexy, so nobody ever talked about it, like when Apple took on the FBI. But Microsoft is taking the right and harder stance. Yes, Microsoft should be open sourcing their shit. Regardless, let's take the wins where we got them. Okay, they said that the two biggest cybersecurity threats today are nation states, nation state action and organized criminal action. Just take out the word action and you get what they're saying. They know government is the problem here. Okay. It is the absolute real problem. I'm not going to blame the victims. I'm going to blame the fucking NSA. I'm going to blame these guys who aren't doing their due diligence, who aren't being good digital citizens, good citizens of the internet, and letting companies know that they can actually do something about these, exploits that could literally cause people to die because they're not getting their surgery or worse. I don't know. I mean, maybe the Tomahawk missile thing is a little hyperbolic, but I do appreciate that Microsoft is continually, this is the second time, like I said, where Microsoft is making the analogy saying, we don't see why digital quote unquote property or digital goods are any different than physical goods. They should fall under the same ethics, the same considerations, etc. And I agree with them. So now these, whoever launched WannaCry is not making a whole ton of money. They didn't ask for a whole ton of money. Maybe, considering Microsoft's very harsh and ugly stance, I really don't think that they were behind this. As far as what happened, it could just be, a malicious hacker group of some kind that maybe it wasn't malicious. Maybe they wanted to prove a point. I don't know. Sometimes there are hackers that will, and I don't think this was done with good intentions, but there are hackers who, with good intentions, will infect effectively, like routers and all this other stuff, and put more secure firmware in them. That's happened over the past few years. Okay, I don't know that this is that. Maybe somebody had some twisted sense of justice that they were going with here. I don't know. I really, it's pure speculation. We just don't know the source of this. Don't fucking say Russia. Come on. You could say any theory is valid. okay, maybe, but I really, I don't know what kind of the point was here. Was it a test bed by the government themselves to see, okay, how quickly can we infect things, using this, blah, blah, blah. I don't think so, because again, like, this really had already been fixed. Unfortunately, like, the solution to this was really preventable. Kind of like Gizmodo was saying, is that if people just kept their shit updated, it would have been all right. Now, I don't want to blame hospitals, because, here's the thing, is that a lot of the stuff that's using like Windows XP still and all that, like, there is no upgrade path for them, right? Because maybe even the company that sold them the devices, that the hardware that they're using, that put the embedded version of Windows XP on there, they could be out of business. Like, there's no way to do the fucking update. It's not possible. It's not feasible. It's certainly not financially feasible, because there'd be so much custom work to be done. You'd bankrupt a hospital. There's so many problems with this. Yep. A solution would be for it to be open source, and then independent groups could come in and fix everything, blah, blah, blah. Sure. Yeah. I'm totally open to that. Okay. But I want to empathize with the fact that, like, it is hard to keep some things up to date. There really needs to be a drastic shift in how a lot of this is going. But that speaks to what I was talking about earlier. Okay, with Windows 10s mobile, or not mobile, with Windows 10s and all this, like changing the very way that apps and that operating systems themselves work and what's going on in the back end. There's got to be a change. We either have to go like fully open source with this stuff, which a lot of companies are not going to do. Or the way that it's all set up, the patterns of it, has to change. And I think Microsoft is on the right side here, with trying to deal with this. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not apologizing for that company. I'm not really a fan of that company. All right. I'm just putting it out there that's that I think that they are really trying. And that statement was a strong, I don't know many companies that make that kind of claim against the U.S. government, certainly not ones of that size, or of any government for that matter. So this is, really, WannaCry is a warning. It's an absolute warning of this is what can happen if we don't implement best practices. That means, reporting secure, 0 days, security exploits, keeping shit updated, maybe switching over to open source. Not that open source is inherently secure. It just has the opportunity to be. That's all. It has a much better opportunity than Windows does. And, I've theorized before, and Windows 10s might be, a step in that direction. I've theorized that Windows might one day be open source, and then Microsoft would really be on the right side of this. But I think that, this is crazy, and it's definitely something to pay attention to. If it didn't affect you, great, you're doing it right. But I know there's a lot, and some smart people that this really affected. And this is just, I hate to use the word criminal, but I think it's criminal if you're if the potential, like it infecting hospitals, maybe they didn't intend for that. I don't know. For people to potentially die, that's how serious we have to take online security. That's how serious you have to take digital security, is because, one person's lack of security could effectively, could affect a hospital, and then could affect, somebody's literal life. Like, somebody could really die. So yeah, just a crazy week, all these stories. Easily preventable though. That's really the main story with WannaCry. It's one of the worst things, one of the worst events to ever occur on the internet, or because of the internet. And it could certainly occur without it, but it's also it was one that was probably the most easily preventable through a bunch of ways, through government action, like not hoarding these exploits, and then just how things are set up, and that people could keep their shit updated, and there you have it. So anyway, okay, so affiliates, I'm gonna have to go a little long because I have more stuff to get to. In fact, you know what, I'm probably gonna have to. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna have to skip. I had a tool of the week. I had what was my story for tech history here? I'm going to have to save tech history for next week, and I'm going to save the album of the week. I'll save that all for next week when we've got everything in place. We'll have all the, all the new intros and all the new bumpers, whatever. And then we'll rock all that. So, because I don't want you to go away without my review of Alien Covenant, because I am fucking excited. I thought this movie was, I thought it was great. I really enjoyed the hell out of it. So let's break into it. But before I do, real quick. So CryptoCompare.com. Boy, if you want to keep an eye, and if you're not keeping an eye on the Bitcoin price and the price of a lot of other altcoins and everything, looking at Zcash, looking at Litecoin, all of it. If you're not doing that, here's your place to do it. Just go to cryptocompare.com. They got your hookup. They, you keep an eye on the prices, trends. You can, get looks at all the new wallets and, read reviews for all that stuff. It's your one-stop shop, in my opinion, for really important information about what's going on in the cryptocurrency space. So head on over to cryptocompare.com, and I thank them for supporting Sovryn Tech, because now, spoiler alerts, folks. I'm putting that one right out there right now. Spoiler alerts. I don't say I didn't tell you. We're going to talk Alien Covenant, and I'm not going to intentionally try to spoil, but there's things we got to talk about here. So the movie itself, now, I mean, let's talk some technicals, because, all right, the acting was top notch. Like, I mean, there's no issue with the acting whatsoever. In fact, it's one of the first thing that really stands out, in my opinion, was because they got the same guy to play Peter Wayland that they got to, let me back this up. So Alien Covenant, in case you don't know, Alien Covenant is, a sequel to the 2012 movie Prometheus by Ridley Scott. This is also by Ridley Scott. And it's a prequel to the 1979 Alien. And of course, it was a 1986 Aliens by James Cameron. This is one of my favorite franchises, like just hands down. It's so fucking good. And I enjoyed the hell out of Prometheus in 2012. It's a very divisive movie. Some people love it. Other people, there's like really no in between. Some people either love it or they hate it. I probably watch it at least once a year, along with, the rest of the Alien movies. I mean, I like to keep up on it. But I love Prometheus. And so this is a sequel to Prometheus, and it really is. I mean, there's plenty of points where you get some closure, whether you like it or not, on things that happened within Prometheus. Admittedly, I did kind of feel, as far as a sequel goes, I did feel like I got kind of a similar, not so great payoff of the events of Prometheus. Kind of like how with Alien 3, like I think Alien 3 is probably the worst of the Alien movies, not counting Alien versus Predator. I think it's probably the worst of them. And Alien 3 is just such a depressing film that when you get off of Aliens, like Aliens has this, in many ways, really a beautiful ending. And I'm not saying I'm opposed to there have been a sequel to, to Aliens, but Alien 3 is not the direction it should have gone. I mean, you pretty much, spoiler alerts, folks, if you haven't seen these movies, I mean, they've been out for 20 years. Like Hicks is dead. Bishop's really gone. Newt is dead. Everybody except Ridley's dead. And fuck it, the aliens still, the xenomorphs still survived. I mean, then that's just depressing, And so I feel like with Alien Covenant, as far as in its role as a sequel to Prometheus, it was similarly depressing in that way, because you don't, Prometheus was promising kind of these answers to our origin, to humanity's origin, right? Where did we come from? Who created us? You find out who created us, but like a lot of the why and a lot of this other stuff, you never really got a great answer to in Prometheus. And it's funny because at the beginning of Alien Covenant, this is the point I was going to get to, you come back to the character of Peter Wayland, which of course is the guy that started Weyland-Yutani, which is the company that, is always trying to get their hands on the xenomorph and everything, throughout the history of the Alien franchise. Weyland-Yutani is kind of like the bad guy, but in some ways almost sort of the, not so bad, or, sort of the good guy. I mean, they're the Google of space. I mean, they really are, or maybe the Amazon of space. I don't know. But yeah, so Peter Wayland, credit to them. They got the same guy to do the acting for Peter Wayland, as they did in Prometheus, which I thought was cool because, one of the big questions with Prometheus was, okay, if Peter Wayland's going to be an old guy through most of it, which he was, because like the TED Talk with Peter Wayland that I think is amazing. They never really play that unless you watch, there's a fan edit of an extended cut of Prometheus called Gift Bearer, Prometheus Gift Bearer. Really worth it. It's the best version of that film. Very much worth a watch. Get your hands on that if you can. Unfortunately, Extra Torrent's gone, but there's other places. Anyway, you get that great TED Talk and you see why they used a younger actor. But a lot of people are like, well, if they're just going to use this old guy, why did they get a young actor and put him in old makeup? Just get an older actor. It didn't make any sense. Well, I think the reason is that Ridley Scott had been planning on sequels for Prometheus for a while. I think he already said that there could be it could be a 4-movie affair. Now it looks like it's actually going to be 3. It's going to be kind of a prequel trilogy, because the end of Alien Covenant certainly lends itself to another movie. I mean, in fact, there has to be another movie for connecting tissue between Alien Covenant and 79's Alien. Okay. So, but I think they got a younger actor because that way they could age him kind of gracefully at various points within the Prometheus/Alien, franchise. So it was a smart move on their part. I don't take any issue with that. And now it kind of makes sense so that they could use him, or maybe they could use him as a future, kind of like how they used, Lance Henriksen to play, one of the Wayland, descendants. Or even ancestors in the case of like Aliens versus Predator. So when you have a younger actor, you have a lot of more versatility of what you can do with characters of that ilk, or the character itself, in that case being Peter Wayland or his descendants, like I said. And certainly Lance Henriksen, that love the actor. But very old dude now. So you don't have a whole lot of play with him either. Even though obviously Disney's doing amazing things with the, facial makeup technology. But anyway, so, the interesting thing is that it opens up with Peter Wayland talking to David, to the android, or David 8 more specifically, not Walter at the beginning. Walter is the other android in this movie, but he opens up talking about how this is like the great question that we need to answer. And you and I, David, it's Peter Wayland saying it, we're going to answer it. And that is, why are we here? What is the origin of us and all that stuff? And, it's funny, you never get that payoff. Maybe the third film is going to give you that ultimate payoff, because the payoff you do get in Alien Covenant is, where did the xenomorphs come from? Even though still you kind of don't know, where the modern xenomorphs come from. And I don't mind that question being answered. There was a lot of negative critics of this movie saying we never needed to know why that happened. I don't care that I know. It's actually kind of fun to know. It made for an interesting story, that we do know. But obviously this isn't this movie can't really give you the origin of the aliens, because we know that, or the xenomorphs in this movie, they call them neomorphs, and there's another term for them. But we know that there were previous versions of xenomorphs even before the movie Prometheus, the time frame of the movie Prometheus, which is 2103. I think is when that takes place. And then this one is 10 years after that. And then Aliens is, and then Alien is 10 years after that. 'Cause it's Alien in 2123, I think. I think that's in 2123. And then in Aliens, or maybe it's in 2113, because then Aliens I know it's in 2179. It starts off in 2173 and then it ends up in 2179 while they're traveling. But where the hell was I going with that? Yeah, right. So before Prometheus, before the 22nd century, there were xenomorphs of a type, because you see them in the 2,000-year-old ship of the engineers, right? You see the mural of one on the wall. So obviously not a new thing, but their modern creation, is explained in the movie Alien Covenant. The acting is great. Michael Fassbender does a fine job as both Walter and as David, really knocks it out of the park. There's some great lines there. The thing I liked about this movie the most is that, like Prometheus, and I think this is why people hated Prometheus, it's a very slow, it's not a very busy film at all. It's very paced. There's not a there's points where there's plenty of action. Make no mistake. I mean, like every Alien movie, when you get towards the end, there's just, nonstop action almost, it seems. I like the fact that this is kind of a, especially the first hour of it is a very boring film. I like my science fiction that way. I like my science fiction to be intellectual and thinking. I don't want blow 'em up, action, boom, boom. I just, I can appreciate that too. I love action movies. Don't misunderstand me. But I can totally dig that something is a little more slower, slower and procedural, much like Prometheus was. This definitely takes a lot of cues from Alien and Aliens as far as style and pacing and tricks that it kind of pulls off, like narrative tricks where, there's a secret betrayal, right? Remember Ash, which you find out is a synthetic, in the original Alien. I mean, it takes a lot of that, but it makes it into kind of a mashup, and it works. And it really, really works. And some of the vistas and the, kind of the outer space shots and the shots of the actual ship, the Covenant. I mean, it's some of the most gorgeous stuff ever put to film. Absolutely stunning. I mean, it just has a very detailed look. And the technology like kind of works, like even like this giant solar sail. It's really cool to see that, in action. The acting was great. I think that, Catherine Waterston, she plays the character of Daniels, who is kind of the Ripley of the movie. And she admitted she knew she'd be compared to Ripley. Well, I'll compare her to Ripley, and I think she's great. She's not, I think she delivers. She's not better than Ripley. Ripley's arguably the greatest action hero of all time. I wouldn't say anything against anybody that made that claim. She is so badass. I mean, and look, let's just call it, folks. Ripley is fucking hot. Like, she's hot. She's badass. She's tough. She's intelligent. She's, in my opinion, one of the rare, perfect fictional characters ever devised. Certainly Daniels, played by Catherine Waterston, not at that level, but she does fine. She, her acting is spot on. There's points where, she kind of pulls off being sort of a weaker character, and she delivers, she makes that very believable. And then there's points where she brings on the strength and it flows, it works. And she makes it look legit. She makes it look very believable. So I thought that she was just fine in this. Like I said, Fassbender was great. Then let's see who else, who surprised the hell out of me. And this is the other kind of one of the other main characters of the movie, was Danny McBride, who played T, or Tennessee is what they call him in it. And he's the chief pilot of the Covenant, of the ship. Now, if you know Danny McBride's work, I mean, this is a guy that plays generally like comedy, usually plays some sort of like a Southern hick and is there for, all the comic relief. You never see a serious bone out of this guy. He was serious as a heart attack in this movie, and he was top notch. Like, he delivered every line. You totally believed it. Even if you've seen all of his movies, you never feel like laughing at anything unless it's meant to be a joke. And there's a couple of them that are very funny. You never find yourself laughing at it. Like, he just delivers it, and it's totally straight, and it works. I was in awe. Danny McBride really, in my opinion, stole the show. For this whole movie, at just how well, because you just didn't expect it. You expected this guy to be all laughter, and not a serious bone. Like I said, not a serious bone in his body, but the absolute opposite. He was, I thought he did a tremendous, believable, and serious job. So, kudos there. So yeah, acting across the board was fantastic. Ridley Scott, of course, is, kind of tied up for my first or second favorite director. He's usually tied for me with Paul W.S. Anderson. So I certainly go into this movie with a bias. I think it's another one of Ridley Scott's masterpieces. Let's talk a little bit about the music. Kind of a new blood that scored this. Originally wasn't supposed to be Jed Kurzel, but it ended up being Jed Kurzel. And Jed Kurzel, I think he did. Like I said, I don't know any of his other work really, but he borrowed so much from Goldsmith, not really from James Horner, because James Horner, well, when you listen to the score for Aliens, especially if you have the 2-disc version, James Horner really recycled a lot of music from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which he, also composed. I mean, there's a lot of cues that are exactly the same. It's a little embarrassing sometimes. And I think that's why people don't talk about the music in Aliens a lot, because they don't want to point at the fact, that's Star Trek II. So he didn't really borrow from Horner, but he borrowed from Mark Schneiden. Oh boy, Mark. I can't think of the guy's name who scored Prometheus. But the theme from Prometheus, the life theme as it's called, is back in full force in this movie, and it's just goosebump inducing every time you hear it. That is such an epic theme. One of the best themes I think ever written since like Jurassic Park. Just a beautiful, not scary at all. Not like Jerry Goldsmith's score, which is a very non-traditional score that went, or unorthodox, I guess is maybe the term, that did some very strange, very odd things, some odd musical movements. But he borrows from all of that. Jed Kurzel borrows from all of it, and he delivers just what I think is a very faithful score to the Alien franchise. And I was very pleased. I listened to the soundtrack actually like 2-3 weeks before this movie came out. And that was one of the first things that got me hyped up. I was like, no, the score is doing everything that an Alien movie should do. He's borrowing from all the right movies and all the right artists and all the right moments, and it's there. That's good. That's a good sign. Even though I think Jed Kurzel was brought in late to do the scoring. So music's phenomenal. Effects wise, it's beautiful. I don't know that there was an imperfect shot in the movie. That's, there's not much to say about effects. And imperfect, what I mean by that is like where you see that it's an effect. I don't feel there was much of anywhere except for maybe some moments with the neomorphs where you could really see the CGI, which is kind of a pity because, like, especially the movie Aliens, of course, the great Stan Winston did the bulk of the effects for Aliens, and those were all hard effects. Those were not, there was no CGI really involved, even though Cameron would later, pioneer CGI with The Abyss. The Alien Queen from Aliens is still the best looking and most realistic and most terrifying alien, in my opinion, ever made. And so when you have that level of realism that's so indelible in your mind when it comes to xenomorphs, or it's one of its predecessors, like the neomorphs in Alien Covenant, it stands out. Like, you can tell that it's CGI and it doesn't look as, may not look as vicious or whatever. But for some people that might be a good thing, right? Because then it's not as scary because it's not, it's not real. So that could almost be seen as a bonus for some people. That's a pity. Some people don't watch the Alien franchise because, of their reputation for being horror films. I think you can really get past them. In fact, Stephanie and Stephanie's not a horror film fan, really. You wouldn't say you're a horror film fan at all, right? No, yeah, she's nodding her head no. So, but she watched these movies. She loved them. We just recently did a rewatch because I was prepping her for going to see Alien Covenant. And she really enjoyed these movies. So, even if you're not into horror and you never watched these, go watch them. I think you can really get past it. So anyway, that was the only spot where maybe the effects were a little weaker. The story overall, no real problems here. In fact, it's kind of solving what is a problem where with Prometheus, you had all the setup to really connect to what, in the 79 movie Alien, what Ripley and the crew, of the Nostromo, what they end up finding, right? Dallas and all them. But that in Prometheus, the planet is a moon, or it's a moon, and it's called LV-223, I think. But we know in the 79 Alien, the planet is LV-426, right? So what happened there? Like, what's... like, how exactly do the xenomorphs get from LV-223 and end up, at LV-426? Well, you're starting to get the explanation. There's still room for another movie because this movie goes to, at the end of Prometheus, this movie goes to, and you know this because if you watch the prequels, the prologue stuff that was released on YouTube exclusively, that's largely not in the film. That, they went to paradise. They went to the planet of the engineers. And what happens there? Well, that's another thing, but that planet is not LV-426. So the next movie has got to take us to LV-426, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping that Alien Covenant does enough money to where they can justify making another movie. Apparently Ridley Scott said already that he's making, that they're starting 14 months from now, from May 2017, that in 14 months, they're going to start production of the next Alien movie. And I hope so. I mean, he's not getting any younger. And he really is kind of the core component, unless you can get James Cameron. He's really the core component to pull this off. You don't want Joss Whedon, who's doing, who did Alien Resurrection. Was it David Fincher that did Alien 3? Though he got stopped by, the production team because Fincher's a fine director. So anyway, hopefully that'll happen. I look forward to that. Something I will mention. Okay. And I don't know how much depth I want to go into this, but there were a lot of people who talked about a lot of the Illuminati symbolism in the movie Prometheus. I'm just going to tell you this. Alien Covenant is absolutely loaded with it as well. Okay. Now, I recently did a Patreon episode saying how I don't hold a whole lot of stock in this whole Illuminati thing, but not like you can buy shares in the Illuminati, so, don't think I'm going into the realm of conspiracy here, but there is a whole lot. And I mean, Ridley Scott does this with a lot of his movies where there's a lot of illusion, not illusion, but, a illusion, to a lot of different things. There's a lot of allegory. There's a lot. I mean, even, a lot of people don't know this in Prometheus. So you find out in Prometheus that the engineers were going to destroy humanity 2000 years ago. And for some reason they didn't. Now, Ridley Scott kind of, winks and nudges at the idea that an engineer went to Earth to find out, if they still needed to be destroyed, that like an advanced scout. And that engineer actually became Jesus Christ and was crucified, the whole thing. So that, but you never get that hint in Prometheus. You never, other than, what stopped it 2,000 years ago from happening, 2,000 years ago, you think, what's the big event? Jesus Christ, right? But you have to go down that line of thinking to get there, even though Ridley Scott has said it, extraneously. He's, said it outside of that. So there's a lot of little things. I'll be intrigued to hear what stuff he alluded to with Alien Covenant, because I can make some guesses here and there, but, anyway, I thought it was an excellent film. Just to top it off. I genuinely think it's not one of those movies where it's so bad it's good. It's one of those movies that is so legit and everybody's bringing their A game to it, that it's a genuinely very good movie. And it's a nice remix between Alien and Aliens. And you also, you get your mixture of the stuff from Prometheus, which is very welcome to me. I am such a huge fan of the entire Alien franchise. I read all the comic books. I love the game. Alien Isolation is great. Alien vs. Predator 2000 is one of the greatest games ever made. We didn't get into game talk this week. God damn it. I had a great one for you. But we'll save all that for next week. Again, we had a lot of stories, really a lot of catch up to do with this episode. So yeah, go see Alien Covenant. I thought it was top notch. Like I said, everybody brought their A game. Ridley Scott was on top of it. The writing was good. The acting was perfect. Everything was hitting where it needed to hit. There wasn't a weak spot, really in the whole thing, in my opinion. The only part, all right, I'll give you this. Here's one I'll give you, because you saw this in the trailer, so it's not really a spoiler. Here's the one flaw I had with the movie. And that's pretty good if I can only come up with one. You take another movie that I love, like say Star Wars: The Force Awakens, I can think of 30 flaws. I could just rattle them off where it's like, oh, that doesn't make any fucking sense, and there's only one that doesn't make sense in this. So there's a point where the xenomorph, or the neomorph, I guess, is on the Covenant. Now you see this scene. It's the shower scene from the original trailer for this movie. There's only so the Covenant is a colony ship, and there's some odd 3,000 people on there and a bunch of embryos and other shit. Okay. So it ends up with, you only have a couple people that are awake, that are out of cryostasis, that are going after the xenomorph. Why the fuck would you wake up at least a few more of those colonists? You've got to have, quote unquote military people, or, some kind of enforcement body on there. Get 30, 40, 50 of these people and go hunt this fucker down. Like that didn't make any sense to me, that they have all of these humans on board who, probably wouldn't mind having a little agency over, what their fate is with this, fucking alien running around, and have them help you out, get this thing. That was the one part where I was like, that just didn't make any goddamn sense. I would be waking up everybody saying, okay, we got to do something about this alien. We're going to, you take point, in sub-level C, you take point in whatever, part A, however you designate your ships. But other than that, like I said, I thought it was flawless. I didn't, the writing was good. A lot of the answers given, even if I wanted more, there were answers given. At least there was some payoff, which if you're doing a trilogy like this, I think it's really important for the second film to give you some kind of payoff if the first one doesn't deliver all the goods in the first place. So yeah, just a fascinating film, gorgeous film to look at. Which I expect nothing less from, the guy that made the greatest movie of all time, that being Gladiator, and that being Ridley Scott. So check it out. Woo, that's it. I went a little bit over time. I apologize to all my affiliates. I actually got a new one on board too, and I apologize. I will get it down to 2 hours next week. I promise. There won't be so many stories. Woo, actually, don't let me use that term. There we go. I'll see you on the other side. And if you want to get more of that content, baby, get on board with Patreon, Sovryn.tech.com. Believe me, you're going to love it. Everybody, the reviews I get always are saying you're doing your best stuff here. You got to check it out. So Sovryn.tech.com to become a patron. Like I said, next week, I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to Sovryn.tech.com That's SOVRYN.tech.com. And connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.